Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 316 of The Team House. I'm Jack, here with Dave. We have some great guests here in studio tonight. Talking about a specific topic, talking about how the United States and specifically the Department of Defense partners with foreign nations. But we'll also hear a bit from these gentlemen as far as their backgrounds. We have Dr. and Lieutenant Colonel Franky Matisek and Dr. William Reno. Why don't you guys, we have a topic to kind of focus on this show. But before we jump right into that, let's hear a little bit from each of you with some introductions. And Dave's going to do a shout out.
We're going to do the ad reads real quick. We appreciate our supporters, the people supporting the show. Our first sponsor for tonight is Fabric by Gerber Life. Hey, look, we've all lost friends. You know, that's not just part of getting older, but, you know, we're part of a generation that saw a lot of combat, and we know how hard it is on the families when they're left behind. So, you know, life insurance, term life insurance, those are things that everybody should be thinking about. Fabric by Gerber Life is term life insurance you can get done right from your couch, all online and on your schedule. You could be covered in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. If you've got kids, and especially if you're young and healthy, the time to lock in low rates is now. Even if you have life insurance through your employer, it may not offer enough protection for your family, and it may not follow you if you leave your job. And frankly, it's never enough. I mean, don't tell, you know, your partner how much you have.
Or your kid.
Or your kid, yeah. There'll be a change in regime. Fabric has flexible, high-quality policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Fabric has partnered with Gerber Life, trusted by millions of families like yours for over 50 years. There's no risk, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and you can cancel at any time. They have over 1,900 five-star reviews on Trustpilot with a rating of excellent. Fabric was designed for busy parents like you, and it's more than life insurance. Free digital wills, access to investment accounts to invest in your kids' future and more, and manage it all right from your phone. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Apply today in just minutes and meet fabric.com/teamhouse. That's Meet Fabric, MEET for all you carnivores out there. Meetfabric.com/teamhouse. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states, and prices subject to underwriting and health questions. And then our second sponsor for tonight is one of my favorites because I'm a hot sleeper and gosh knows I love ghost bed. Look, if you sleep hot at night like me, you know just how disruptive it can be, how miserable it is. Whether you're having trouble falling asleep, you're waking up sweating in the middle of the night, or all the above. That's where Ghost Bed can help. As the makers of the coolest beds in the world, Ghost Bed is your go-to cooling mattress, cooling pillows, and even cooling bedding. From their signature Ghost Ice fabric to patented technology that adjusts with your body temperature, every Ghost Bed mattress is designed with cooling in mind. So whether you want a plusher mattress that cushions your shoulders and hips, or a firmer option with exceptional support, your Ghost Bed will keep you cool and comfortable all night long. When you purchase a Ghost Bed mattress, your comfort is guaranteed. You can try out the mattress for 101 nights, risk-free, and make sure it's. I always think of the 101 Arabian Nights, and make sure it's the right fit for you. Plus, they offer free shipping and most items ship within 24 hours. That's 101 nights risk-free. If you don't like the mattress, send it back. If you're not sure which Ghost Bed is for you, check out their mattress quiz. You'll answer a few questions to get your personalized recommendation, or reach out to their friendly team of sleep experts for all the help you need. Even better, Team House listeners can get 50% site-wide for a limited time. Just visit ghostbed.com ghostbed.com/house and use code HOUSE at checkout. Again, that's ghostbed.com/house with code HOUSE at checkout to save a whopping 50% off site-wide. And again, if you're not in the market for a mattress, check out their linens, check out their pillows. They have a lot of great stuff.
And before we move on, one last thing. We Defy the Lost Chapters of Special Forces History. My book is out this week. It's first week in publication.
It's number one, right? Or
in some of its categories,
Yeah.
available on Amazon, print or ebook, however you prefer.
Look, if you don't read it, the commies win.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why you would not read it is if you hate the troops.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can imagine.
Or you hate freedom.
Yeah, you hate freedom.
Do it for our country.
Okay, before I want to hear about both of you gentlemen, but I think, Frankie, you want to give your disclaimer up front?
Yes, the views of Lieutenant Colonel Matisek do not represent the official views of the Department of Defense, U.S. government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
That was very good, Frankie. We'll see if that's enough to cover your ass through this interview.
Exactly.
You know, what is it? You know, they say don't do anything your pay grade can't afford or something like that.
no, that's a fantastic point. I was telling him before we kicked off the podcast here, I do not want to be a colonel, so anyone on the selection board watching this, I am trying to ruin my career, so you are welcome to get angry at whatever I say tonight.
So Blumenthal, go ahead and take everything out of
Yeah, clip
context.
Yes,
Yeah, you
it's-
clip this stuff.
Yeah. I by the way, and for my background now, again, U.S. Air Force pilot, currently a professor teaching at the U.S. Naval War College right now. So
Well, that's not how we do it. So,
shit. I fucked
how
it
did
up.
you grow up, and what made you think about going in the military? And was it always a pilot?
oh no, man, we got to go that deep.
We're going that deep.
Oh,
We want to
shit.
know you guys.
Oh man, Will, this is gonna get real deep because like he probably should have been in the military, and I should have just been like a Berkeley hippie, just like protesting you people, like stop killing the babies and the baby seals.
So you dropped flowers from your. Yeah. So how did you grow up?
I grew up in San Francisco, man.
Okay.
So I'm probably the most like I don't know that this couch is gonna catch on fire. I might be like the most like left wingy liberal woke person you'll ever have in this room, and yet
Yeah, it's a good thing you don't want to be colonel because you're about to lose your job.
yeah, I know.
Actually, I don't know if that. I don't know that actually. I don't know that that's a bad thing anymore.
Losing your
Yeah.
job.
No, being woke and I mean that's.
No. I mean, I'm obviously saying in jest, but yeah, no. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, single mom, grew up really poor, food stamps, etc., and just sort of like, at some point, my mom got me into Boy Scouts. So I was an Eagle Scout. Also, Will Reno was also an Eagle Scout as well.
Along with 4 others in my family.
Yeah, and so it just sort of like kind of came natural to me in one sense of like, I don't know what I want to do with myself. And then I got really, really dumb lucky that in high school I got really good at wrestling in high school. I didn't know that was even a sport until I got to high school, and got again really lucky that I had a coach that was a Army reservist and was like, hey, you should join the military. And I'm like, nah, I don't really want to be in a trench and do stuff like that. And he's like, oh, okay, maybe you should join the Air Force then. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to like. He's like, no, you stay in hotels. There's no
Yeah.
trenches.
Yeah.
Per diem.
Yeah.
You can fly airplanes. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound
Air
so bad.
conditioning, yeah.
Yes, and so that's kind of how I ended up actually going to the U.S. Air Force Academy.
Okay.
It was lucky that I was pretty good at wrestling. I got recruited to wrestle there.
Cool.
And so I don't think I ever was supposed to ever serve per se, but it matched me and it fit me. And
So what airframe did they put you on?
I ended up in the C-17.
Okay.
So I did that 2008 through 2011. So lots of Iraq
yeah.
and Afghan runs.
Yeah.
I probably took you guys
Yes,
around
you
at some
probably
point.
did.
Yeah, 2008, 2011. Got over 2,000 hours in the jet, and then they sent me off to be an instructor pilot in the T6. And then I went off and got a PhD. That's where I met him as my advisor at Northwestern University. So I was at
Yeah.
Northwestern.
Flew a T6 up to Midway Airport and took the L in your flight suit.
Yep, it was the coolest, I guess, interview you could ever do. It was like, yeah, I'm gonna fly my own
with the
airplane up to
18 pack of beer.
up to Chicago and meet him and interviewed him. And it was a perfect fit for us.
I mean, it's hard to get pulled over for that, isn't it? If you're flying and.
No. This is the best part of this whole trip of us going of me going up to Midway in my own military airplane. Along the way, I stopped to go buy alcohol to go hang out with him and meet him because he was like, yeah, I like beer. A police officer in Chicago ends up buying me like a 24 pack of beer while I'm waiting in line to buy like my alcohol. He's like, "What are you doing?" Because I'm in my flight suit. And he's like, "I should buy you this." I'm like, "No. You're a police officer in Chicago. I should probably be buying you alcohol because this is a scary job."
Yeah.
And then it was funny. Other people online were like, "Hey, you're buying him. You're buying the pilot, Air Force pilot, like like free alcohol. I'll chip in $5-10." So like literally like it was like a crowdfunding effort to buy me alcohol. Meanwhile, I'm like, I'm here. I'm being paid per diem to be here. Like, this isn't actually costing me money, but I'm like, fine, you want to give me free alcohol? I'll take free. Again, Air Force pilot. I have no problem. You want to make all the Chair Force diva pilot jokes you want tonight. It does not offend me or bother me because I love the Joint Force. You guys do the shit that I don't want to do and I would never want to do, and I embrace and I love what you guys have done.
I'm surprised that they didn't like pack up pre-mixed martinis for you on your trip. Like what the Air Force was like.
Yeah, they can't treat officers like
Yeah,
that.
how dare they? So I have a question about flying into Bagram because I know it's kind of in a bowl, but is it really that difficult of a landing, or were the Spaniards just assholes?
The Spanish were probably being assholes. It's not that hard to land there. It's not. Like, at least in the C-17, if you want to do a proper tactical descent, you would just do the math and be like, all right, for every 1,000 feet you are above the airfield elevation, you add a nautical mile for like your slowdown. So typically it's like, hey, we're usually hanging out 23,000 feet coming into Bagram. All right, 20,000 feet. Airfield elevation there, Bagram was like, I think 4,000-ish feet. So you'd be like, all right, 24 miles, basically 24 miles because you want to use like a 3 or 4 mile slow down, hanging out 20,000 feet above, 24 miles, idle, and just basically cruise down to about 230 knots the whole way down.
So can you do a straight? I thought you had to kind of do a loop a bit because of the
We
bowl.
actually don't.
Okay.
We actually don't.
So
that was a bullshit thing.
It was the Spain. It was
Yes,
those,
yes.
Yeah.
People, it was funny because I remember everyone kept talking about like you have to do the spiral
Yeah.
and avoid the man pads and the Dishka 12.7 millimeter, and then you actually do it and you're like, no, you can just do a straight in like from
Different
25
than
miles out.
for the Russians. Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably different for the Russians, but for a C-17, 24 miles out, idle, 230 knots, idle, and just throw out all your speed brakes, gear, flaps, everything, and just do this whole thing and just do like a steep, like 5-degree fucking descent.
Just glide it right in.
So, William, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey. Where did you come from? You said you were an Eagle Scout.
Yeah, I was an Eagle Scout along with 4 brothers. So we were a pack of Eagle Scout family members, good at camping. Grew up in Baltimore, but traveled around quite a bit. And so just got into traveling to different places, doing the education thing. So I'm a professor at Northwestern University, but work with Frankie here, looking at foreign military training. So,
but I want to say, just throw it out. He can trace like almost everyone in his whole family. His ancestors were all in the military, even going back to Cussard's last stand. If you want to talk about Major Reno, Major Reno did get in trouble though at Cussard's last stand.
Yeah, if anybody's a history buff, Major Marcus Reno. I'd say if he hadn't stood off on the other hillside with Custer, I probably would not be here. So,
where did
that.
you go for your postdoc work? How did that come about?
Yeah, what was your course of study? Like what were you interested in, and why did you like choose education?
Why did I choose education? I guess I'm kind of the post-Vietnam generation, so
Yeah.
I had different family members. I mean, Colonel Reno, my grandfather, and visiting Fort Meade to do the shopping at what they used to call the PX and that kind of stuff, and Uncle Jim, who had the Green Beret thing, but all the signals I got was that the people I went to school with who went in the military was like to do drugs and
Yeah, it wasn't great.
hang out and have a good time in Germany or wherever. So I chose the education route and ended up as a professor at Northwestern University. I mean, which is a job I love because it's a great day job. It gives you the platform to be able to do all sorts of things. So Frankie and I, we got 2 Department of Defense grants and I got a lot of students who are military, active military, that earn their PhDs and so forth. And I mean, my combination of camping is partly through, now it's JSAL, the Special Operations University at Tampa. Back when it was at Hurlburt, it was what I would consider kind of more flexible and versatile things. So I'd worked with them, and, whichever elements wanted to request, I don't know, you want to go camping in Afghanistan?
What
help you
was
with that, so.
how did you get to that point though? You like, what was your major in, and then what was your like your your follow-on schooling, and what were your interests?
I mean, for the research that I did, I went to grad school and got a PhD like Frankie here. I went to go study some stupid thing in West Africa, but I was in Sierra Leone and Liberia, and then a war broke out, and we didn't have the internet then. So I was kind of a dumb animal, and what I did was I just stayed. That became my research, was in the politics of non-state armed groups.
Oh, wow.
Because that's who controlled the place where I was living. Something called National Patriotic Front of Liberia, run by a guy named Charles Taylor.
Yeah.
So, he was the sheriff in the town that I lived in, and learned how to get along in those types of environments. Like I say, I'm good at camping, and that was a lot of camping out and studying politics of non-state armed groups, working at different places like Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq. So I'm the local context guy. So you go to a place, you want to fight, you want to do whatever you want to do, you have to know like what's going on the ground. I'm not kind of like the native guide, but I know enough stuff that I can point you in the right direction, maybe give you a few pointers about, what you would do.
Are you writing ethnographies?
It's like ethnographies of armed groups.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say he actually, and this is I'm so lucky I got to train under him in grad school, under his tutelage, if you will, because it's part political science, part sociology, and part anthropology.
It's like anthropology. So,
Were there, so if I were to think of a non-state armed group, my level of thinking is very basic. What were some of the things that like stood out to you, or that you like while you were there in Liberia? Like, what were some of the things that were realizations that maybe people like us wouldn't know?
I don't know. That's kind of a tough question, because I think the realization is that you gain an understanding of the environment around you, and when you shift from peacetime to wartime, it's like you go from one culture to another culture. Mm-hmm. And trying to get into the heads of the people that live there, that fight there, and, all the moms and pops and, I don't know, guys who join militias and that kind of stuff, trying to figure out what makes it tick. Like, why are they doing what they do? And can you learn enough about it that you can anticipate what people are going to do, and then advise outsiders how not to step into it? Like, being patient, being observant, looking at what's going on, being able to draw conclusions from that, and then being able to package that in some sort of way that's actually useful. So, I think that, it's hard to explain in short form to an audience.
Sure.
In a way, you have to be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And, I think judging from your audience, there are a lot of people who've been there. And, it's tough because you come home and you can't explain it.
Right.
So, I'm kind of caught in that. But as an academic, what I can do is I can try to formalize that as much as possible, so that, bullet points or some sort of longer form, something that people can understand, connect to, flip that switch, make that transition into that environment, and be able to understand, because there's all sorts of stuff around you, like official government things, U.S. government regulations, and so forth, that once you move into that world, it's just like total unreality.
Right.
And you gotta, if you want to survive, you gotta know what the real rules are.
Well, and
try
honestly,
to
and the
figure
main
out.
thing that in our research when we go out to these countries, Africa, the Middle East, or Europe, the number one problem we usually encounter are U.S. embassies basically being fucking clueless.
Right.
Clueless, risk averse. You have
Oh, I mean, I feel like my head's gonna explode sometimes, when you deal with folks like that, because the U.S., like our power, there's such a narcissism that's associated with it.
Yeah.
So you get into a place, and it's like our way or the highway, and you're like, no, that's not the rules here. That's not the way it works. And I mean, I think Frankie and I, we meet people in all sorts of official positions that realize sort of the way things really work, and they're very frustrated a lot of times because it's like the system doesn't allow them to
Yeah.
actually use that information. And that's a big part of what we do, like our research, is that we're at that kind of inflection point, I think, with DoD money, but we're going to use that money in a way to trick them. I mean, in a good way.
Right.
Because,
Right.
What we do is, we're sort of like the fish that can swim in the sea. It's like, for me as a civilian, like with the Ukraine stuff, I'm the guy who can go there, and go see what our foreign military training's actually doing out there on the battlefront, and be able to deliver the hard reality, the stark fist of reality, the way it really is. And so that, back to the original question, I mean, that's my training. And so I'm the local context guy. I'm the guy who goes camping, figure out what's inside people's heads as best as I can.
And you probably, like both of you, probably have a certain level of authority that, because I guarantee you that, like, before we went into Iraq, there were probably some very brilliant analysts that were GS-12s, GS-13s saying, we don't have a plan for stabilizing this country. Like, we're going to destabilize it. We're going to give Iran. But who's going to listen to a GS-12 when it doesn't meet the threshold for what, like, the politics want, where you guys are kind of outside of that system?
We're outside, but I don't know. Does anybody listen to us either?
No,
I mean,
and that's what I joked early on about, like, I don't care what happened. I don't care about what we say, because we've been writing highly critical articles for the last 5+ years.
yeah, I mean, somehow this lieutenant colonel, I don't know how he survives, but I mean, I'm just a guy, and
And from time to time, you get curious individuals that are generals, SESs, and other sort of higher up people in the food chain that will actually reach out to us, like, thanks for writing this. I wish I could say this, but thanks for writing this. I'm going to use this in the next meeting.
that's right. You get the voice in the wilderness, people that have a sense of the reality, that are sort of caught in the maze of the rules and regulations and so forth. I mean, we can't overestimate the impact of the work that we do, but when we do get those types of contacts and we can develop relationships with people like that,
Right.
that are in positions where, maybe they are making decisions or influencing people make decisions, then, that's important. And what we want to do is, as the environment changes, like as geopolitics changes, I mean, how to put it bluntly, we want to win. And what we want to do is, we want our knowledge, like the research that we do, to be as useful as possible, try to help our country do better.
And I was going to point out too, and this is good for like your whole audience to realize, because people don't actually realize how important this is. So since the year 2000, the U.S. has spent over $400 billion on security assistance, training and equipping all kinds of militaries around the world. $400 billion. That basically comes out to at least 20-ish billion a year since 2000. That's a lot of fucking money.
Yeah.
To basically have not done anything.
Right. Right.
That's something that like we tell people this.
I mean, we do stuff with it, sort
Yeah.
of, but I mean, it's kind of.
We
develop
we
relationships.
arm the up and coming generation.
We pay warlords for dump trucks
Yes.
full of gravel.
Yeah.
We're really good at
Yeah,
that.
but sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes we hit it right.
Yes, but that's always
We
our.
could do it better.
Yes, and that's our point. That's
our
our whole
point.
objective.
That's our whole thing. I think about the Cold War, and Cold War was the last time we were competing. In the Cold War, we had to try harder.
Mm-hmm.
So, we got our rules, which I think are very important because our rules are partly about our values, which is our national interest. So there are things that we will not do that our adversary will do. And that's the way it should be. In that context, we should also be aware of where we have to be flexible, adaptable, have knowledge on the ground, and be able to move, and to be able to move intelligently. And our system over the last 3 or 4 decades has forgotten how to do that. So our mission, like Frankie's and my mission, is how to restore that kind of intelligence to the way that we conduct foreign military training. Do it with partners, do it in a way that serves our national interest intelligently, adeptly, and, depending on the context, a small footprint or whatever. But
Is there
but
Oh, sorry.
not like we've been doing it in the past.
Are there I know that every non-government armed group is going to be different, and is there a way to strip away the politics, the religion, the tribes and things like that? Are there some fundamental truths about these groups that we deal with?
Yeah, I think there's some underlying fundamental truths. I've been doing this for a long time.
He hung out with the Mujahideen back in the late 1980s in Afghanistan. So this isn't like,
Right.
I was born in 83, by the way, just so people know.
Yeah, the bad people, like when this guy was crawling on a rug. I was in, places like Korengal when they were the good people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things is that when you get into the heads of people, I think in different parts of the world, what you realize is there's a lot of commonalities. Like everybody cares about their kids.
Right.
Everybody cares about, advancement and protecting what they have and these kinds of things. So I think that in a world where, we're obsessed about, who's a jihadist or who's fighting for freedom or these sorts of the issues which are referential to us, like there's certain commonalities. So when I think about foreign military training, what I'm trying to think about, like when I go to Ukraine or whether it's in West Africa and Somalia or whatever, what are they fighting for? What's their will to fight? These kinds of basic things that I think are generalizable across conflicts. Different people, different cultures, these kinds of things. These are the points of contact to start to understand what's really going on. And if our country's going to be successful to build relationships where we need to, I don't give a whatever about, what their domestic policy is or, what kind of garb their women wear or anything like this.
Right.
It's what are their interests? What are their objectives? Where can we partner?
How does anybody trust the United States to partner with them since we have been leaving our partner forces since Vietnam?
Well, I mean, again, that's kind of a Cold War versus post-Cold War. I mean, Cold War, I think we were a better partner. Because in the Cold War, we understood what our interests were. Since then, we've had discretion.
Yeah.
We can pick them and choose them and drop, partner and then leave them and this kind of stuff. I think that part of the challenge now in a more competitive geopolitical environment is understanding what our interests really are. And, it's not that our partners, we have to love them for now until the end of time. They need to understand that too. But where the coincidence of interest is genuine, if we care about our interests, we'll stick with them.
Does that, I mean, not to get partisan about it, but I mean, I imagine that, this post-Cold War construct you're talking about, especially right now, it seems like we're internally divided about what our national values are.
Yes.
Yes, we certainly are.
And that, I can only imagine that must reflect and express itself in these partnerships.
No, and I think that's why we actually need to have this really tough conversation about we're at a crossroads, and the problem with the current crossroads we're at, we keep lying to ourselves as Americans
About who we are.
about who we are,
Yeah.
but also that we're not at war, and that we can keep on lying and telling ourselves that we're living in this liberal, rules-based international order, that laws and norms matter, and that as long as you keep doing this, the U.S. will triumph. And the problem is, we're not going to fucking triumph if we keep doing the same dumb thing over and over again. So this
Right.
actually takes us to the crossroads. This is, we are trying to avoid the fork in the road. And I've been having this conversation with like my students at the Naval War College, because I had this epiphany a couple weeks ago, and I think you guys might appreciate this, because we had this conversation and they all agreed, as I'm seeing you guys are nodding along about, like, yeah, we're lying to ourselves about this liberal rules-based order and the system and laws and norms matter. The UN matters. None of this fucking matters anymore, but we keep lying to ourselves that it matters. And the reason why I say it's a fork in the road is because we have two choices right now. We either just basically commit to World War III, or we commit to Cold War 2.0.
Right.
And Cold War 2.0 has benefits, as is committing to World War III. Committing to World War III, basically, and it's not what you think. I know.
I know what you're saying, yeah.
No, you have two choices. If you commit to World War III, you're basically telling Moscow and Beijing, we are fully mobilizing the West against you. What are you going to do about it? I'd like to bet they'd probably back down.
You got to kind of do both.
And
You
Cold War,
you got to be credible.
Yes.
World War III. If you
Yes.
challenge us, we'll challenge you.
Right.
Maybe long term is Cold War.
and that's where
'Cause-
Cold War 2.0 becomes more sort of politically palatable.
You know where World War III ends.
Yes.
So
So
let's not do that.
So that's why Cold War 2.0 becomes a logical outcome at this point.
Right.
Because if we keep lying to ourselves about the liberal rules-based order option, just ignoring we have to choose the fork in the road, you're actually going to get the World War III
Right,
because
right.
we're going to stumble into dumb escalation. So you
that's-
actually have to choose. I mean, the path of least resistance right now to me is you have to choose Cold War 2.0, and that means we have to start making hard choices, and we go back to thinking like it's Cold War 1.0, and you have to start looking at the world in a way of great power politics. And yes, human rights and norms and laws matter. However, if we can do something in country X or region Y or this area of Z to counter and deter or spoil the ambitions or actions of Russia and China, you have to fucking do it. You have to do it.
And it feels like, so, I feel like both the Doves and the Hawks, and I want to lay it on a political party because it's kind of swapping every now and again, but the Doves and the Hawks have both gotten it wrong, right? That the Doves are soft on the wrong stuff to be soft about, like cultural relevancy and these things. They don't matter. We think they matter, but to the people we're working with, they don't. Like, they have their own norms.
They got their own. They got their own world. I mean,
So
this is part of the narcissism.
Yeah.
I think of the U.S. You get dominant, and you have a relationship with some other country, and you go, okay, we like you, but you got to be exactly like us.
Right.
Here's LBGT plus or whatever. Great, fine, wonderful in domestic U.S. politics. That doesn't fly in a lot of other countries. Or, here's, I don't know, some other kind of rule that we think you should have.
Right.
Or expecting a country to have an exclusive relationship with America and not the Chinese and Russians,
Right.
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 Depending on where you are on the map, you can't.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the best example, I love to give this, and I wish I could remember how to say the word in Thai, but I had a Thai officer who talked about what it's like being competed over by the Americans and the Chinese.
Yeah.
And he's like, he gave the expression in his language, but he's like, the word translates, the expression we have is we call ourselves the bamboo in the wind.
A
with
woman
the
in the South would say she had many gentleman callers.
Yes.
Hey, gentlemen callers. I mean,
Yeah.
you live in a particular place. The United States is far away.
Yes.
Some other big countries close. That country's not moving anywhere.
Right.
The United States, maybe there's going to be change of
And
next election.
and-
They're going to move out. So what are they going to do? They're going to hedge their bets. So if you want to have a relationship with them, they understand like the way the world works. So, you have to accommodate to that.
And that's the whole point of the context too. Is again go back to like a Thai officer or even the Indians or any a lot of these countries that are in sort of like these areas of competition on the periphery between regional hegemons. Is you speak to these people and they'll be like, yes, we want America here. We want to engage with the Americans, but the problem is we don't know how long term your commitment is. And
Right.
Go back to like that Thai officer. Like the Thai officer would be basically telling our class, he's like, look, I'm here in America. I'm here. I love this experience, everything about this. But at the end of the day, China was in our neighborhood 2,000 years ago, and China will probably be in our neighborhood 2,000 years in the future.
Right.
America has barely been here, and there's a good chance they probably won't be here in the future.
I'd like to just ping you a little bit on
Yeah.
what makes for a bad partnership versus a good one. Like, have you read I think Frank Sobchak's new book, Training for Victory?
No.
Okay, so he has 5 case studies in it, and he points to some positive examples. Colombia, El Salvador, Philippines. Maybe you could. I would probably throw South Korea in there.
Yeah.
Oh, why are these ones effective? Why do they work? Whereas the Afghanistans, the Iraqs, the Somalias don't.
You got a leadership in these countries that want the same thing we want. So you got a good coordination of interests. They're not going to undercut your effort versus like Iraq, Afghanistan. You have members of the government. I worked in Somalia. Somalia, it's like the defense minister's cousin was al-Shabaab. How's that guy going to be credible?
Yeah.
And it's not that guy hates the project that you have. He has to think about his family, about who's going to be the strongest sheriff on the ground. So he's going to hedge his bets. He's going to be passing information to his relatives, So he's part of the problem. Same thing in Afghanistan. It's like the thing that you want to change, the people who are in charge in that country are part of the problem.
Right.
If they change, they're going to be out of a job.
Right.
In these other places, El Salvador, Colombia, South Korea, they want the same thing. So if you think about those circles, like here's our interest, here's their interest,
They intersect.
there's a lot of intersection there. I think that some of these other cases could say the same thing about some of the programs that we studied in Sahel Africa, like Mali, Niger, Chad. Woo, it's like circles are completely apart. There's this film from the early 1990s, The Crying Game, and it's about 2 people love each other, but it turns out that the other partner's like very different than the guy thought.
Not so different today.
In a weird, perverse way. You have to look it up on,
Yeah.
check the Wikipedia or whatever. Oh, wait, but we can't imagine ourselves not being in that relationship. everybody else is saying that's a terrible relationship. That partner's not right for you. And, that's the way we were, I think, in a lot of these relationships. I mean, I think for the future, back to our research and the stuff that we do, part of it is trying to identify what are good partners. Like, how do you pick those relationships, develop those relationships in a wise direction so that, it's not that you have to love each other, but you have similar lines of effort.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a genuine relationship rather than trying too hard and deceiving yourself that, oh, I love you, but I can change you.
Right. So
It's like that never works.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, in Afghanistan.
I want to interject on this point because you mentioned obviously like the case studies about even like Colombia, and what makes our research very different from anyone else that does this for the most part. Usually, most people just go talk to U.S. and NATO advisors,
right,
and just ask questions. We actually go talk to the other side and be like, "Hey, what's it like to work with the Americans?"
Yeah.
And then we develop a little bit of rapport, and
It's
then
a context thing.
Yes.
It's like I'm like the squirrel on the ground or whatever. It's like, it's like, let me see, how's this working out for you guys on, from your perspective.
And so to that point, I actually asked a Colombian general, why did our efforts to train and equip you work better than compared to Iraq and Afghanistan? And he gave me such a simple answer that I still have yet to actually write this down or publish it because I just don't know how to put it because it was such a simple answer. He's like, first off, we're just closer to your country. We are geographically closer to your country.
And culturally, they're closer too.
That's the fucking best part.
Yeah.
He's like
really
number two.
close
He's like
culturally.
number two. Yeah, that's the fucking best part. He's like number two. And he's like, we're just culturally more similar than you are to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's it? And he's like, as far as I'm concerned, geography and culture. That was literally like the Colombian general's answer as to why we were effective in training and equipping the Colombians.
But
you
the
know
real-
what? We also had the same adversary.
Right.
We wanted the same thing.
Right.
We wanted the same outcome.
Right.
And, I think that looking at some of these other relationships, Not so
the
much.
real kick in the balls though is after we have all this information and there are people like you that study it in depth, like we still feel like we need to have our sphere of influence in these countries. And I mean, the Middle East, we just can't quit you. We're in the ultimate toxic relationship.
I mean,
there.
my message, America, everybody listening here, America, you love too much.
Are you calling America a hoe?
She's not going to love you back.
They're not going to love you back. And this is why, Cold War gets a
She's
bad
just
rap.
not that into you.
Cold War gets a bad rap a lot of times. But the Cold War was the last time we had to compete. And one of the things about competition is it focuses your mind. And that's the point at which you say, what are we really interested in? What is our strategy? And, part of the problem, I think, with a lot of what we've done in the last 30 years is we haven't actually had a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
We're loving too much.
Yeah.
And, it's like that isn't, like when I'm teaching my students, about development, American military strategy or whatever, one of the things I keep telling them is, it's like when you fight, if you're going to go fight for something, you have to be able to explain to people, what are you fighting for?
Right.
That is your strategy. What do you actually want? And how do you justify that to the American people? And, I think that gets at the core of developing these kinds of relationships. If you know what you're fighting for and you understand what your partner is interested in, this is where you develop genuine relationships. Colombia, beating the FARC rebels.
Right.
We had different interests than the Colombian government did, but we understood each other. And we were fighting for the same thing. Like, we're going to beat those rebels. Colombians were good partners, not 100%, but, you know, it's like we were there, we could back them, they could understand us and knew that, you know.
It seems like in some of those countries, Colombia and the Philippines are two that come to mind, where it's actually preferable and good that they're like, hey, we're a sovereign nation. We don't want you guys in here with all these troops and stuff. We just want a little help, you know?
Well, and if you're fighting for the same thing, I think you get a partner who's a lot more confident.
Right.
And, you know, it's good for us to make these kinds of strategic decisions because we don't want to waste our energies with bad partners. You know, I hear all the time, it's like, oh, Russians are in this country or that country, Central African Republic, we should go do something about it. What? Central African Republic? I guess I know where that is. It's central. It's in Africa. Well, it's not a republic. But, you know, look, if the Russians want to be there, good for them. You know, it's like, all right, I think that's a strategic win for us.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
see how that works out for them.
Yeah.
You know, let them make the mistake,
Right.
not us make the mistake.
China's learning that now too, with their, you know, with their expansionism, with spending money in places where people are your friend today and they're not, you know, and
Let
they
them
won't be
spin the
tomorrow.
wheels. Let
Yeah.
them learn the lesson we learned.
What the sorry, I lost my train of thought. It's fascinating though. How do you feel as though China and Russia will be worried about the next Cold War when, and again, our hawks don't do it right either, in the sense of people like the Houthis are just running rampant and basically doing what they want.
Well, no, so I like how you pose that question because for Russia and China, they don't want us in Cold War 2.0 mode. They don't. They like us. They like us continuing on this this path, this self-deception and lie that
The rules-based order that every foreign affairs magazine talks about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, we're
exactly.
just, it's like we're
Exactly.
walking.
China and Russia
Yeah.
want us to keep fucking believing this. And unfortunately,
They're changing the rules. Yeah.
yes, they're changing the rules. Foreign affairs, foreign policy keeps publishing these articles. Each admin seems to keep hiring these people that keep pushing this narrative.
Yeah.
That we have to keep doubling down on rules-based order. And that's why it takes me back to
vapor-
this fork in the
vapor
road.
lock.
It's World War III or Cold War 2.0. If you don't make that choice, you're gonna just fucking lose it all. And that's my concern about
Yeah.
about this rules-based order in Russia and China, which is, and also they have an incentive to actually shape the information space and influence operations, et cetera, to basically convince us that these things aren't worth actually fighting
Right,
for.
right.
So anytime any of you out there read an article saying like, you know, no American should die in Ukraine, no American should die in Taiwan, no American should die in country X. If you're Russian or Chinese, you want to promote that narrative
Right.
and that
If Russia or China didn't pay them to say that, they should.
yes. And that's the other part of this competition.
Right.
Yeah, they want America to back off. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
you know, it's the United States. I mean, this is our critical juncture. Do we want to compete?
Right.
Or do we want to back off?
And not just back off, but stay like completely disorganized. It's like we're walking down the street and we keep on getting hit by random people in the face, and we're like, oh, just you wait, and then we just keep on walking, and nobody, like, people are not taking it seriously.
Look, it's a hard road for me. I mean, I spend time in Ukraine. You know, it's like the guy gets to go look, what's foreign military training doing for Ukrainian forces in front line? And that is competition. That's competition. That's a major war in Europe.
Right.
Biggest war since 1945. It is bloody. It's very different than wars that Americans have fought. And when I'm there, I feel like I'm in the future. And then I come back here, it's like, I don't know, you know, I'm visiting a dream world.
Yeah.
Well, even anywhere in Eastern Europe, they're like, you know, any part of Eastern Europe, you know, Poland, Romania, Hungary, it's like people are being killed by fucking Russian ballistic missiles a few hundred miles east of you, and yet it is business as normal in Eastern Europe.
Look, I just came back. Wednesday I came back from Ukraine. You know, part of our work, what would I call it, embedding or whatever, I'm observing. A battalion, 60 days, 5% killed.
Man.
You look at the blood. I mean, it is hard. I mean, I don't know. How do I describe in words? You know, it's cold. There's snow. It's terrible. I mean, Americans have not experienced this since the First World War. I don't think they experienced it in the Second World War. Like the way that combat is organized, the way that people fight in the 21st century in countries that are developed, that have technology that we have. And, you know, we live here, we live in a dream world. And, you know, I look at competition. Competition will find you. You don't have discretion about whether you can opt out of this. It will find you. And, you know, it's like our choice at this moment. How are we going to deal with this issue? How do you prepare for defense? How do you prepare to protect our national interests? And what Frankie said, you know, there's a foreign interest in sort of seducing us into this complacency that, you know, it's like the 1930s. You can opt out.
Right.
And it will find you. You can opt out for a while,
Yeah.
but it will find you.
And the best example of this, actually, I'm glad you guys brought this all up, was because I submitted an article essay to like one of these traditional academic, or not academic, you know, a foreign. I'm not going to name the outlet because you're gonna laugh at the fucking response. I basically wrote an essay basically saying that with what's going on in Syria right now, this is a great opportunity for the U.S. to basically make a better deal with the new Syrian rebel government to push the Russian bases out of all of Syria.
That's right, the NATO-aligned Islamic State.
Yeah.
But that's important because, you know what? Do we care how Syrians rule themselves? Do we really care
We can't.
what their domestic policies are? Is that our national interest?
No.
Or is our national interest where they fit in a
Right.
bigger geopolitical puzzle?
No, and this is why you guys will fucking love this shit. I don't know if you guys, there's, besides the two main Russian bases in Tartus, like the big naval base and the big air base up there by Latakia, there's almost about 80 Russian bases throughout the entire country of Syria, right? And most of those are all just little outposts and little bases. The response I got to this article from a very high-end outlet was, my only argument was basically, Washington needs to make a deal with the Syrian rebels to basically push the Russians out of Syria altogether. Give them a better deal than whatever Putin's going to offer. To which, if you are a fan of the Mediterranean or Europe in general, you do not want Russia having bases in the Mediterranean.
That's the way the game is played.
Yeah.
And
You got to compete.
And the fucking response I got was, what makes you think Washington can tell Syria what to do with bases in their country?
Well, we got a bunch in there now in Deir ez-Zor and Al Tanaf.
Well, you know what?
And I was just so, I didn't know how to respond to this. So I was
Yeah.
like, wait. So we're this great American military power, we're this great
Just
American
hands
power.
off on everything.
You know what, Hillary Clinton? It's over. We're moving on. It's time to compete.
That's a great example when we're bitching about foreign affairs, foreign policy, and other sort of high-end outlets that just keep pushing the same narrative of like, who do you think we are telling the Syrians? And it's like, we're not telling them. We're just accepting great power politics and reality.
Yeah,
Which-
you know, it's like I read foreign affairs or foreign policy, and I think, oh, this is really boring. It's the same stuff over and over and over again.
Yeah. We
And,
repeat the same lessons.
You know, it's a different world, and you know, Frankie and I, studying foreign military training, it's about partnerships.
Yeah.
And partnerships with, partners and allies, it's about competing. And what we want to do is, like, our core mission is how to compete better. I mean, that's our little tab that we gave out. Train harder. Train harder, maybe.
Well, it's actually
we'll say from an academic perspective.
advise harder, Will. but,
Advise harder.
Advise
All
harder.
right, sorry,
You already
I'm-
forgot the.
I'm thinking more.
He's had a few drinks.
I'm thinking more in the field. I'm thinking about training because it's like got to go observe. But it's like advise harder, and it's like what we have to do is we have to recall an old craft that we had.
Yeah.
And we've had a generation, we've had a vacation from history, which has been wonderful. And I wish the world would continue that way. But again, it's like it will come for you.
Right.
If you don't prepare for it, it will come for you.
I want to dive deeper into Ukraine because you guys both have recent experience there. But one other thing I'd like to ask you about, I talked to somebody who worked out of an embassy in Eastern Europe, and he pointed out to me the difference between how Americans do foreign military sales and the Russians. Like, they'll come to us and say, we want like 3 Black Hawk helicopters or 3 F-16s or
Yeah,
whatever.
and we'll say, okay, 3 years from now.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're
Where-
lucky.
Where the Russians will say, we'll have it to you next week and you can pay us 3 years
Give
from
us
now.
a list. What do you need?
Yeah. What do you guys, how does that influence these relationships?
It is the bane of our existence, and it's. I'm glad you mentioned like the FMS part. So that's foreign military sales, because the Ukraine war has exposed over the last almost 3 years now this sort of disjuncture, if you will, in regards to what America says it can do and what it can actually do. And when I say that, I mean that in the sense that it's very clear if we want to actually give a country a weapon system or capability,
We can.
we can.
It's not that we can't, we just don't want to.
So this,
Yes.
we've been speculating, and it's pure speculation. We've been speculating about this for a couple of years now as to whether there is an element within the government who sees this as an opportunity to bleed Russia and to drain Russia's resources, and so has been slow rolling the armament, giving Ukraine weapons, but not necessarily what they need to actually get aggressive.
I don't know. I mean, that's
It's speculation.
I mean,
No,
it's
it's-
interesting question. I mean, so if I try to get in the head of President Sullivan, and I'm trying to think,
Leave Jake Sullivan alone, Will.
it's like, okay, slow escalation. Why don't we give the Ukrainians more to fight and so forth? I think that's being too rational in a way. I think that is assuming that there's a larger plan. I think that, like, U.S. policy in terms of equipping Ukrainians has been more reactive.
Okay.
That, it's like, okay, the Russian invasion, the full-scale invasion, they thought in Washington this was going to be a 3-day war.
Right.
And, it turned out that the Ukrainians resisted. And what they've done is they've sort of played this catch-up to try to adapt. And, it's like they draw their own red lines and so forth. I mean, if I try to get in their heads, I would worry about red lines because, I mean, this has pretty high consequences.
Right.
I mean, Russia's a nuclear armed power, so that's important. But at the same time, I think that saying that they're trying to bleed Russia as part of some kind of long-term strategic plan gives them too much credit.
Okay.
Because I don't think they really have a strategy. I think that what they're doing is they're playing this sort of, chapter by chapter and adapting as the Ukrainians go on. And this is part of the problem that we've had since the end of the Cold War. There's not a coherent strategic vision.
Right. What?
Because if I ask the the Sullivan administration, where does this end? What is your ends? Like, why are you doing this? I have a hard time answering that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and that's a
But
big
it's-
problem.
but
And,
it's
and again,
far
it's
from-
only like, I'll say just real quick.
Yeah.
I mean, to the average American taxpayer who may be watching, thus far, it's only cost us 47 cents per day per average American taxpayer to do this. We have weakened Russia. We have.
I mean, I'm totally for weakening Russia. Like, I'm the guy who goes to Ukraine. I'm the guy who does the front line thing. And, you know, so I'm kind of like irretrievably biased. and-
There's a human cost to it that, and I'm not at all saying that Ukraine should roll over to spare, you know, their young men and women. I'm saying that, you know, America either needs to shit or get off the pot sometimes. Like, and the thing is, when you say that there's no strategy, why would there? We couldn't even develop a strategy in a 20-year GWOT. Like, you know, people are kind of fretting over the idea of recalling generals and asking them, what did you do during the GWOT to earn your money?
Oh no! That's a fantastic point because nothing pisses me off more than any time I have to go to like a ceremony or any sort of like formal sort of like military or an academic thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, and this person was in command of the train and equip mission to the Iraqis or the Afghans where he successfully, and it's like, no. Yes, that's the Bronze Star he fucking got
Right.
for doing that.
Right.
But it was all built on a house of lies. Like
Right.
the amount of fucking people in Iraq and Afghanistan that submitted, as far as I'm
Bullshit
concerned,
reports. Yeah.
false fucking
Yep.
mission reports.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You did train, 10,000 Afghans or 10,000 Iraqis, but the quality you omitted intentionally.
That's an entire generation of field officers
Yep.
who are
Yeah.
groomed to believe it's okay to lie
Yep.
to their superiors.
And, you know, and it's
well,
not...
because they're like, it's not lying if you omit. That's the fucking
playing the game.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
fucking problem. And I saw that when I was in Afghanistan in 2020. The amount of times I would see emails come out about how great the mission's going with the Afghans when I was in Kandahar in 2020.
Well, that's a luxury. That's a luxury of dominance.
It's the job now, because, you know, you can't blame Bush or Obama or Trump or you know, or whatever. I mean, presidents don't know everything. They have to rely on, you know, on the people.
Yeah, but also, I mean, you can lie when it doesn't matter.
Right. In the bar when you're talking to that
what
girl.
does it matter? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like,
right.
you know, I mean, ultimately, when we left Afghanistan, should we have left 10 years earlier? I don't know. Would have been different. Probably, I don't, you know,
Yeah.
there'd be fewer Americans killed in that country.
Did the American way of life
What was the
change
outcome?
after August 21?
What was the outcome?
Did our lives
We
actually
have a
change?
Taliban government in Afghanistan.
Right.
Are we worried about that?
Nope.
Does that satisfy us? Is that a problem for us?
We're funding them, right? Or I thought we're giving them money, so
Right. So, you know, maybe we want to buy their Soviet weapons and give them to Ukraine.
And we need a lithium to make fucking batteries anyways.
Yeah.
Well,
There's
so-
a trillion of lithium in Afghanistan.
So, you know, there you go. That's luxury. I mean, that is a vacation from strategy.
All
Right.
Let's jump into Ukraine.
yeah.
Oh, yes.
tell
A
us-
favorite topic of mine.
Let's start sort of at the beginning ish. The wall comes down. Ukraine is sort of on for a long time on the periphery of the European
Oh,
community.
we're going back to '89.
Like, yeah, if we
Okay.
if we
Oh,
start
snap.
there,
All right.
and
All right.
where
I see you.
America's
I see you.
where America starts a relationship with now what is a sovereign independent state, and we start moving forward from there. And Ukraine's relationship, like you said, some of these countries that are pitted between two great powers, Ukraine smack there between the West and Russia. How does that relationship begin to develop?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
well, at least from a U.S. perspective, you have the California National Guard have a relationship with them through the State Partnership Program, also known as the SPP,
Yeah.
beginning in 1993. So in a weird way, and it was primarily Air National Guard relationship. So the Ukrainian Air Force, basically over 3 decades, developed a pretty good relationship with the California Air National Guard. And when we say developed a really good relationship, this is probably a good template of how, if you want to do a security assistance cooperation correctly, you go all in. And this may be uncomfortable, like for a couple of people to listen, you know, for everyone that is listening to this right now and the viewers, but like like when I say they went all in, like the current wing commander in California that is in charge of this mission to Ukraine, he speaks Ukrainian. And many pilots and other sort of, Air National Guard personnel have married Ukrainian people they have met while doing these missions in Ukraine. So they have fully gone in. And I don't think we're trying to say that we have to go like full T.E. Lawrence in these countries, but in a weird way, you actually kind of have to, if you think this matters and you want it to matter and you actually want to have impact and you want to impact an adversary intentionally, you kind of actually need to identify people in the U.S. who can be your T.E. Lawrence in that country, and for just micro pennies on the dollar, just devastate an adversary with minimal escalation.
Well, that's back to the question of, are we using Ukraine to mess up the Russians?
Right.
And to what ends?
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I spent some time in Ukraine and so forth, and I don't know, I'm kind of conflicted because I want to, be 100% with Ukrainian brothers, and I've had sort of on the ground experience with them. I just came back Wednesday from, a place, and it was cold, and changed my clothes after 10 days and still didn't smell, because that's what it's like when it's really cold. You don't sweat. But, what are the Ukrainians fighting for? And should we care? I think they're fighting for their freedom. I think that impulse has become a lot stronger, because one of the things about being invaded by Russia is that even if they're Ukrainians who had a kind of Soviet mentality, that being invaded by somebody and them kicking you in the face, it's kind of like you begin to think, like, maybe we are a people. Maybe we are different.
Right.
Yeah.
And, like, that's one thing that's really driving this.
The famous, Max Weber quote that war makes states and states make war.
Charles Tilly.
It was Tilly?
It was
But
Tilly.
boy, that is really, that's a big thing. Because, I go there, linguistically, sort of my preparation's Russian. Ukrainian's not the same language as Russian. And, you can understand stuff across the languages. So you think, well, what's really your difference? I mean, it's like Northern Ireland and Ireland. It's like, what? That's all it is? You guys all kind of look alike and sound alike and so forth. It's like, what's your difference? And, it's like war. I mean, that's one thing that really focuses people's minds. So I think our dilemma, like with our relationship, is that, there's a special foundational thing that's going on with the Ukrainians. But for the Americans, one of the things they have to decide is what's in it for them. Do we want to support this not out of sentiment, but out of our national interest? Does this help us? Do we, are we better off as Americans if the Ukrainians are able to resist Russia? And, for me, that's one of the things I'm really conflicted about, because, like, I want to support Ukrainians. I mean, I go there partly to support them. But sometimes I think, I don't know, I mean, is this our fight? I think it is. But when I think that, I think it's kind of about values. But if I'm more hard-headed, I also have to think about, geopolitics. Where are we in the world? How does this help us? How does this protect our freedom, our prosperity? That's a harder question to answer. This has been part of the problem of the Biden administration. I mean, they been supporting Ukraine, but they can't tell the American people why.
Right.
Which is what we call
That's
it.
a big problem.
And which is why,
huge.
like we've written articles about, like, this is the anti-strategy. You know, like the
Right.
Biden admin has basically been doing this anti-strategy, which is basically you are so afraid of escalation, you allow Moscow to escalate.
That was the next thing I wanted to ask you guys to get into is this asinine conversation that we've been having for years now about the escalatory ladder and off ramps. We need to help Putin find off ramps. What the fuck do I need to help some foreign dictator find off ramps? Explain that to me.
Look, I got a chance to take a look into Russia last time I was there. It really sucks. At least,
Kursk is not as pretty as you think it is,
at least the
apparently.
parts that, you don't have to have border controls. Yeah, boy, you blow past 20 red lines and so forth, so you find out what, the adversary's actually made of. But at some point, there is a red line.
Yeah.
Right.
And, if I did try to put myself in the head of people in the White House, I think, maybe the Russians don't even know where the red line is.
Right.
I go over there, I hope that one day is not, 3,000 degrees and intense glare,
Yeah.
because that's part of Russian doctrine.
But
Escalate to de-escalate.
But even Russian nuclear doctrine right now is so, like, it's already been crossed. So, like, for example, in theory, Russia, per its original nuclear doctrine, they now should have been allowed to nuke Ukraine because you invaded Russian lands.
Right.
Per their original. But then they updated it about 2-3 weeks ago after we made our announcement about allowing long-range
Right,
ATACMS strikes. And I have to use long range because as an Air Force pilot, the idea of launching something 300 miles
Yeah,
is
it's
not
not
long
really.
range. That's a day trip. Or for me as an Air Force pilot, that's an hour or two of flying.
That's an intermediate range.
Yes.
Yeah.
ballistic
And
missile.
so the reason why I find that, and these narratives, this context matters is because when we talk about this and we talk about escalation, escalate, de-escalate, the fact that even in response to these ATACMS that we basically said, yes, Ukraine, you can shoot them into, Russia changed its nuclear doctrine. Again, Ukraine had already crossed like the red line
Right.
with Russia per their nuclear doctrine, which is they should have been legally allowed per their own doctrine to nuke the Ukrainians. They basically came up with new doctrine within 2 days, basically saying like, well, an attack on Belarus is an attack on Russia, so we can use nukes. And then the other big thing that I thought was important about their new doctrine was basically if a country attacks Russia and they are trained and equipped and backed by a nuclear armed power, so that basically now makes the Brits, the French, and the Americans complicit.
Well, so what it does is it creates a riddle.
Yes.
And this is part of the problem of modern strategy. So the riddle is you have a, sort of second or quasi third world country. It's got 20 million more people than Mexico, but its economy's smaller, not dynamic, has a hard time adapting, innovation, resource dependent, but it's got nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And you're challenging it. Is it going to fold? Is it going to be third world about the whole thing? Or at some point, is it going to stand up for itself? Is it going to be backed in a corner, get desperate, do something that is going to be extremely unpleasant?
And again, remember, Russia basically has an economy the size of Texas. They just happen to have 6,000 nukes. And that's...
Yeah, it's not in the top 10 economies in the world.
And I know I speak like a little cavalierly when I say some of these things, but do you think that's the logic of the government? If there is an underlying logic that we are going to take these little baby steps?
We're taking baby steps. At some point, there is a red line, I
Right.
think, for the Russians.
Yeah.
But we don't know
Or
where
the
that
current
is
government, but we
necessarily,
don't know
so
where
we're
it is.
feeling it out.
And that's the problem, is that I don't think they know where it is.
But,
And
but we
that
do
is
think...
that is actually a big problem. And thinking about assistance to the Ukrainians, I don't think the Ukrainians are going to go invade Moscow. So, I think that 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 would probably be a real red line. But, were Russian armies to collapse from exhaustion at some point? Domestic turmoil. I mean, here's a country that basically experienced a coup attempt a year ago. I mean, I was in Donbass region in Ukraine when
Prigozhin made his
Prigozhin
march.
was doing his march. I mean, that was weird, even
Yeah.
for Russian people.
Yeah.
That was deeply weird.
Yeah.
And it's like the passive aggressiveness of Russian politics that they could just like paper that over.
Yeah.
Blow the guy out.
I feel like
it's like,
Putin eulogized him and said like Prigozhin was a man with a complicated life.
I feel like they should have had some folk singers marching along, like yeah, it's
Like
weird.
Dune.
Yeah.
but looking at world politics, I mean, this is kind of like this weird, fragile situation because, we're moving into year 3 of the, full-scale invasion war in Ukraine, which has been largely a stasis, sort of the stalemate, but that's not sustainable.
Right. Yeah.
And, what I would ask of, I think, the incoming political leadership in Washington is, what is the strategy? Like, what are we in this for?
Right.
Because I think to say that we're not in it, that's not the correct answer. Because as I say, it's like competition will find you. You can decide to opt out, but it will come for you.
Well, and honestly, when you talk about is it our fight and is it in our interest? And those are good questions because the idea of if Canada invaded the United States, if it were more powerful than the United States and invaded, are we really different people? I mean, they're way too fucking
But we'll
polite.
know. We'll know. We'll figure that out.
Right.
No,
We will decide that question. But the other questions I have for Ukraine is, are they the right partner? I mean, my Ukrainian friends are hopefully not watching this and excommunicate me, but like that society is not fully mobilized.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I'm in front lines, like freezing my ass off
Right.
last week or whatever at this time, and I'm thinking about, it's like, they're hipsters in Ukraine. They're not here.
Are they treating it basically like people in the States treated the GWOT? That is something going on
Oh, it's
someplace
more
else?
than that. It's more than that because they're getting attacked every day in their
Yeah.
cities.
And they are getting drafted.
Yeah.
And they are getting drafted. And, but there are ways out for people there. So when I think about, I'm looking for a partner, I want to figure out if our interests and their interests align. One of the things I want to see is, are they actually committed?
Mm-hmm.
Like, am I giving assistance to a society that wants to push hardest? And, I think that the question for me in Ukraine is they have not fully mobilized.
Well, the question I want to pose to you guys about Ukraine is one that, we had this conversation with Mike Vickers talking about during the Reagan administration. And, we had this sort of strategy with the arming the Mujahideen during the 1980s of let's deny let's deny the Soviets an easy victory in Afghanistan.
Yep.
But eventually some more aggressive people at the CIA and President Reagan had this question, okay, this is nice. How do we win it? And that was my question about Ukraine. How do we go from bleeding the Russians to degrading the Russians? How do we win this thing? That's what I want to know.
Well, I mean, depends on your time horizon. I mean, we could say we want Ukraine to win in Ukraine's terms. And what Ukraine's terms would be, at least among some of them, is there is no Russia. Russia's like a big, complicated knot. And you press on it and, it's a big multi-ethnic empire. And you create tensions in it, through aggressive war in Ukraine, and the knot falls apart. But I'm sitting in Washington, and I'm thinking about a longer time horizon. I'm thinking about China. Mm-hmm. Russia might actually be an ally, or not an ally, a partner.
Yeah.
Because Russia's like 1/10 the size of China. Its partnership with China now is very dangerous for Russia because China could swallow Russia. So I think if I want to contain China, I don't want Russia to get really ground down. You know, but on the other hand, I don't want a nuclear armed power like Russia dictating some settlement that involves the transfer of territory of a non-nuclear power. Like that is also a very unpleasant world. Because what that tells me is, you know, we're back to some pre-1945
Yeah.
world where you can just do conquest.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think about all the other countries in the world that might be eyeing the territory of their neighbor or whatever, and it's like, that's pretty ugly. So, you know, I want to deter Russia from doing that, but I also want to preserve the option in the future of a Russia that is my partner against China.
Like World War II, where they were
It's
partnered.
like, look, we were a partner
Yeah.
with Stalin's
Yeah.
Russia in
Yeah,
World
you
War
know,
II.
no, and this
Because
is
we had a greater threat.
Right.
and we've actually, and again, I've done sort of like mini war games about what would the U.S. and the international rules-based order react to China invading parts of Russia that used to be part of China back in the 1800s. And if you don't know about the narratives of the Chinese and how they think about
Yeah, like half of Russia was China. Or
yeah,
something.
and the fact that the Chinese have
Which
actually
it already is.
Yeah.
Because there are tons of ethnic Chinese that
Yeah.
hop across the border and, you know, you get a pop-up city of 5 million people and somewhere in Siberia. And
Yeah, and the Chinese have already been like producing maps and passing laws saying you will refer to all these old places in current Russia by their old original Chinese names. So they're
Right.
already shaping the battle space, if
Right.
you will.
yeah, it's
So-
pretty chilling, I think, in Moscow. And
Yeah.
so I think, you know, it's like Ukraine, tread lightly, tread lightly. Now, that doesn't go into our work related to Ukraine, which also has to do with sort of how we fight wars in the future.
And I actually think that's actually the most fascinating part is how much we spend time with like Ukrainians that are being trained to fight the current war, but also how much we also have to observe and watch U.S. and other NATO militaries train Ukrainians for a war they don't actually.
Know how to fight.
I mean,
Yes.
segueing
Yeah.
into a different yet somehow related topic, I think, you know, in terms of our work, foreign military training, looking at how Ukrainians use the skills and resources that we provide to them. I mean, that's also a wake-up call in terms of competition, because this is a partner that's fighting a peer adversary. So what we're doing is we're providing support for something that we haven't had to do since up to 1945. And looking at what that looks like in the 21st century, and if that gives us clues as to the type of war that we might fight in the future, like that's like us.
It's a laboratory,
That's what we're doing.
basically. Yeah.
So that's a laboratory. And so when I go to Ukraine and I go to areas of combat, you know, I'm like a time traveler. So I get to travel into the future, go see what it's going to look
Yes.
like.
What's going on in the future?
It's
The past with drones.
It's really bloody. I
Yeah.
mean, it's. I mean, I came from a world where the battalion that I was sort of associated with, 60 days, 5% of them were killed. It's wintertime there, so you get injured. Hemorrhaging's a bigger problem when you're really cold. You get pretty badly messed up. There's no helicopter coming in. There's no 1 hour evacuation.
Which,
'Cause-
which from a U.S. perspective, we're used to like, oh, yeah, you get fucking medevac.
The golden
in an
hour.
Yeah.
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 That's all out the
golden
window.
Yeah.
hour,
It
it's out
doesn't.
the window.
It doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
There's no
there.
golden hour. Okay, so C1 medical care. So, tactical, medical care. It's soldier on soldier. Do what you can. You got this environment where you're under sort of constant attack, and it is fucking cold, and the cold is always beating down on you, and the only way you can organize an evacuation is, it's like you're looking at the cloud cover. It's like, what's your exposure to drone attack? You have about a 10-kilometer zone, close to the contact line where, you can't bring vehicles in. A lot of times evacuation is by foot, for the injured person, as well as anybody else who's assisting. Maybe if the weather's really bad, you're lucky, you can bring a four-wheeler in. So you go to, like frontline surgical areas and stuff like this, some sort of fortified medical assistance, it's 2-3 days to get there.
Wow.
And, it's like, American soldiers haven't experienced this.
Right. For a long time. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to brag, but I've got more frontline experience, I think, than any American soldier. Well, not any, but
But actual
most.
actual modern warfare, not just doing GWOT.
Yeah, right. Some 90-year-old guy, who might have remembered fighting in France and across Germany.
Yeah.
So these are people. They don't have fobs. There's no green beans, whatever, place to go, relax. It's all in civilian housing. It's all in do-it-yourself fortified positions.
It's interesting, William, that you're not talking about quadcopter drones. You're not talking about electronic warfare or cyber warfare or any of the things that we're talking about here in the West a lot. You're talking about old school warfare.
It's all the it's like, some of the pictures I sent you something with,
The
glide
bomb.
drone.
Yeah.
Glide bombs, and I can't send you drone pictures because I don't have clearance for those yet. That is, it's like this hybrid world, because on the one hand you have this high tech where there's no, I don't know where the air littoral is. Because you got
air littorals. Air littorals.
Yeah, because you got drones that are
You read
flying,
that article.
that are flying at 20,000, 25,000 feet at 400 miles an hour. That, I don't know what that means for civilian aviation now in the future.
Right.
So it's like this whole scrambling. It's like there's no air power outside of drones. No helicopters, no aircraft, no evacuation, none of this. So in that way, you're kind of like in a World War I pre-air power battlefield. And, but at the same time, like the ISR is intense. It's wintertime. Thank God for bad weather, because, it's like you've got an infrared and you can see everything otherwise. It's like where the guy pees. You have to sit in a hole. Anything you do, you got to have reb. They're what they call reb, electronic warfare. It's like your anxieties are about battery power.
Yeah.
It's like, how long's the equipment going to run? How long's the IW going to run? And so you're constantly embattled with this. So that's the high-tech, modern stuff. The low-tech is that modern stuff creates like a Civil War battlefield where it's just the humans. It's on foot. It's being 80 meters from the adversary. It's it's very human. It's very
The constant surveillance must be, especially you during the winter. You got thermals out there, so everything pops. But the constant surveillance of the drones, like you said, the ISR, it just must be like brutal.
I mean, it's a lot of tension. I mean, I'm like still trying to unwind. I mean, because you're always under surveillance. Like, there are times I want to go pee. I can't take a piss.
Right.
You want to go take a shit. You got 30 minutes of battery power. You have to go out and do it then. So, it's like you're regimented by technology.
Right.
Yeah.
All of this kind of stuff. Yet you're in this world where you're under attack and you are no better off if you are injured than if you had a horse come and get you.
Yeah.
And even then,
Horse might be better.
Yeah,
might
and
be
honestly, because it doesn't give off the same
Yeah.
fucking signal,
Yeah.
noise, and that's what makes this so weird that we have to like weirdly go back to how we fought in like the 1800s and like in 1915 because of these weird fucked up dynamics. The fact that like you
so
have
that's
to
what I mean.
go
That's
back
the
to using,
message.
like,
That
war
is the
pigeons.
message I want to bring to Americans.
Yes.
American soldiers is think about getting your arm blown off and waiting 2 days.
Yeah.
To get
In
evacuated.
the cold, where it's going to get necrotic even faster. Like
Yep.
any circulation that you stop, it's brutal.
No, and when we talked before, like we even got here into like before we actually got here, like again maybe because I'm a typical chair force pilot, I was under the impression that like when it's colder outside and you get injured, it's actually better. And he's like,
No, it's much worse.
Yeah.
I thought like it's colder, it's cold, like it'll freeze the blood. And he's like, no, it's not.
It never stops.
Typical
It never
chair force
stops.
pilot. My apologies.
It's like, I mean, we were watching an evacuation and we were at a C2 collection point, and there's this young soldier who, hadn't had a problem the day before, and this guy, I mean, he was brought in on a 4-wheeler. And, I think it took about 2 hours to get there, and in the process, he had become hypothermic. What a mess.
Yeah.
I mean, it was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, because then even the rewarming process can create shock that will
And they
start a
had 30
cascade.
people who came in that day.
Do you think
I mean,
that
just like that. I mean, that is the tempo. That is the type of conflict of the future. I mean, right now, with the balance between, sort of like the technology of offense and defense. So if we're thinking about, what if we have a conflict in Taiwan or something like that, and the U.S. wants to become involved, we're not going to have that kind of comfort that we had in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be a real war.
Yeah.
So I think that, the thing that Ukraine and that kind of thing, I mean, there are two dimensions of it. One is, do we want to do it? Like, do we want to support them? The higher level geopolitics. The other is, let's learn about how this stuff works now. And how do we prepare for this so that we're more intelligent about how we approach it? And, I think for us, studying military training, we need to learn from them.
Yes.
Because they are in a fight of our future, potentially. So, we need to figure out how do we adapt to that type of situation where if we're in the fight, a lot of Americans are going to get killed. And we're not going to be used to that. And, like Ukraine's not that much different than us in terms of like how the society's organized, what kind of technology they have, the capabilities. It's not sort of, I mean, no offense to Somali friends and so forth, but, it's a lot more rugged there. And, it's like Ukrainian cities, Ukrainian people, they don't think a lot differently than us about, what they're willing to do, what their will to fight is, these types of things. But that's a fight that they're in. And, I mean, it's very hard for me to paint a picture in words how bloody it is.
No, and
how much blood on that snow.
No, and
how much, like, when you talk to soldiers who are in elements that are losing significant numbers, like, they're going through comrades just one after another who are killed, who are convinced they're going to die, yet they fight. And what kind of support that takes. That's a fight. I don't think we've had that. Even in World War II, we had lines of support. World War I was brief for us. I mean, it's a time that we don't recall. I mean, which is the Civil War. Like the devastation that caused in our people. The number, the percentages of soldiers that were lost. The difficulties of those fights. And that's what Ukraine's going through. But that is warfare today. Mm-hmm. That is a hard reality. And, I think that's part of the value of this type of observation. And I think that's part of the message that we have.
Yeah, and the bigger point of this too is, and this is something that we've been trying to engage across like the broader DoD, the fact that like I don't think we've actually generated leaders that can accept losses
like
of 5% over 2 months.
Yeah.
Because the way we react,
what? The offensive has not yet begun.
Yeah.
This has been 2 months of kind of stasis.
But you think there's going to be an offensive that the
Kursk,
battle,
yeah, of course.
yeah, that they're going to change drastically?
And I agree. I don't think our leaders have the will. They don't. They're all politicians at that point, and they.
I mean, at some point it gets real. I mean, that's why I almost say agnostic or sitting on the fence in Ukraine about whether it's our fight or whether we should leave it to the Europeans. I'll leave that to other people to decide. All I'm saying is when it is our fight, if it is our fight at some point, that is part of our future.
No, and that speaks to my point about like, do we have the right kind of leaders for this? Because you look back to World War II, and again, I'm throwing out the Air Force perspective here, but like you had General Curtis LeMay that had no problem saying, "I'm gonna send out a bunch of bombers on this mission, and half of you are gonna die."
Right.
I can't imagine the pain and personal agony he probably felt doing that.
And we're going to kill a lot of civilians.
Yes.
During the bombing run.
Yes. And the fact that he could do that and maintain some composure, I can only assume it probably caused immense alcoholism and other sort of issues. But, like, we are not ready to make these types of fucking decisions right now anywhere in the U.S. military because we have not trained or fostered or developed people to accept the reality that you're going to send people to go die. Like not just like, oh, go do a combat convoy in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah, you might get ambushed and but like, this is like, no, literally fucking half of you are gonna die. And oh, by the way, if we're talking like an Indo-Pacific sort of China type of scenario, not only are you gonna die, even if you eject and survive, we can't get anything out there to do CSAR to rescue you.
Right.
Even if you do, because it's such a huge area denial, anti-access area.
Yeah, we live in a dream world.
Yes.
Do
Fucking dream world.
Do you
live in a
think
dream
that
world.
we have been out, like you said, we have chosen not to engage in a lot of ways, and we act like we are, but we followed the same plan we did during the GWOT. Do you think that there's room for the next administration, the incoming administration, to even if we can't broker a peace, and partly I feel we owe it to Ukraine, because when we encouraged them to get rid of their nukes, part of them getting rid of their nukes, part of their deterrent was us saying, we got you.
Yes.
There was a military guarantee, though, that we were going to protect them.
A security guarantee of the Brits and the French. It was a security guarantee. It wasn't a treaty. A treaty is different from a security
the assumption
guarantee.
was that Russia, friend.
It was like, we got you, boo.
Yeah,
Yes.
but not really.
Yeah.
Because Russia is our friend.
But so we owe them that. But also, I think that people have become very hawkish in the United States without knowing. Like, nobody was crying about Crimea in 2014. Everybody just ignored it for the most part. And now, you hear people in the States saying, no quarter given, like Crimea, everything back. And it's like, where were you?
Yeah, because the Ukrainians resist. We
Well-
like resistance. I mean, it's
But-
like in 2014, they were not resistant.
I
Well,
understand
some
the
were, but-
Ukrainians. I'm wondering why people in the States are so hawkish about it. It's like, if we can find a way, and so what I was wondering is, do you think there's a way because this goes back to building our image,
Yep.
to being a country that gets involved in a positive manner, hopefully. But do you think there's a way to go to Russia and Ukraine and say, look, we don't know how to stop this war. We want to work on stopping this war, but how about we take these steps, these humane steps, that if you set up a field surgical team in this area, it can be this large, it can have this many people. Will you both agree not to hit each other's field surgical teams? Like,
Oh boy, that'd be nice. I'd love that.
We would all love
if
that.
you
Problem
don't, if you
is-
don't
I mean, the
ask-
pictures I didn't send you are of surgical, tactical surgical teams in, protected locations. They'd just be attacked. I mean, it's a
and
war.
that's the thing
It's
is,
a
if
war.
you don't ask, it's not going to happen. But if you can at all like bring people to the table over something that is mutually beneficial to both of them, like if a guy or girl is going to a surgical team, if they're like messed up, let them go.
No. I think it makes. I think it makes. So to his point, what I think Dave is saying here is that I do. Again, I'm speaking from a sort of a hypothetical perspective.
Sure.
But I'm pretty confident these conversations have been made.
Yeah.
And I mean this in the sense that there are certain hotels in Kiev, in downtown Ukraine, in downtown Kiev in Ukraine,
Yeah, sure. They're not going to target the
that
Hilton
the
hotel,
Russians
'cause-
have not targeted these certain hotels. There are some hotels. If you were in Kiev, if you ever want to go visit Ukraine, there are some hotels in downtown Kiev. You are basically at 100% assured that you will not be hit by a Russian missile.
You won't
Yeah,
be targeted.
boy, but-
yeah.
You will not be targeted, and we are pretty confident the fact that there's probably been a conversation made that if you targeted or blew up these hotels, you would kill a lot of Americans and Europeans that may or may not be in government and military service.
Right.
Yeah, but that's so fucking retarded. I mean,
Yes,
I
that's
don't know.
this is what's fucking stupid about this.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
yeah. But the problem is we know these conversations must have been fucking had, because if Russia wanted to kill American or European forces in Ukraine, there's a few hotels in Kiev they could easily fucking blow up,
Right.
and they
Well,
have
they know
not.
they know the address of the U.S. Embassy.
Yes.
I mean, look,
Yes.
they don't even target Ukraine's government. So
Right.
Yes.
Obviously,
so
there are limits,
that's
but-
why I think it's important to have that kind of conversation as well about like, are we prepared to have American and NATO forces die in Ukraine? Which also becomes its own little fucking discussion because everyone jumps so quickly to like NATO Article 5 and thinks like, oh, if an American or a Dutch or a German officer or personnel is killed in Ukraine, it automatically triggers Article 5 and I'm gonna, invoke the great Michael Kaufman. If you
well,
guys
if I
ever
get
read-
killed in Ukraine, I want there to be nuclear war.
yeah, yeah. But if you guys know who Michael Kaufman is, he always says, from the times I hung out with Michael Kaufman about like Article 5 is not a suicide pact. Like if you actually go and read Article 5 and the whole NATO Charter, it's not a suicide pact.
All right, Frankie, you keep going.
Yeah.
Somebody
And the reason why this is important to to at least discuss is because everyone just says like, oh, there was explosions in Romania from a drone from Russia or in Poland, a missile.
Mm-hmm.
And we automatically just sort of like, everyone just jumps to like Article 5. And it's like, no. Much like Clausewitz's On War, often cited, rarely read, it's the same thing for NATO and the Article 5, which is everyone just assumes like, you think you know what it means, but doesn't actually know what it means.
It's like HIPAA.
Yes. And the reason why I say this is because it basically says like there has to be a collective defense and military response if you actually invoke Article 5. It's not automatic. You actually have to have you actually have to meet and talk about it. But the reason why it's important that we have that type of discussion as well about like what does it actually mean is the fact that a military response can be something as fucking simple as just a mean tweet. And that's information warfare.
Right.
Like people don't realize that Article 5 can literally just be a tweet as a collective defense response. And I think that's an important sort of thing that gets lost in the minutia of sort of like, well, what happened? It seems like things happen in Romania and Poland all the time with a missile or something like that, and it's just people don't realize it.
Well,
It actually matters.
Russia's election interference then automatically like sets that off, right? In the United States.
No, because that's what's fucking comical about this is the fact that like Russia can do all. I'm gonna say Russia. Any adversary can do all kinds of non-kinetic things
Right.
against NATO countries, and it doesn't. There is no Article 5
really?
mechanism for this.
Really interesting.
And that's something that again that we talk about constantly. But the fact that like there are things that can happen in space and cyber and attacks against our homeland in sort of the cyber domain, or
Right.
space domain, that if Russia or China does it, which they already have at this point,
Yeah.
we have to accept it. It's reality. We don't have an official mechanism to say like this is an act of war.
Right. Yeah, we
And-
don't treat it like a hostile activity.
We don't, and we actually should.
Yeah.
And the problem is because we don't, and our doctrine doesn't reflect that.
Right.
Guess what? You exploit that as an asymmetric sort of loophole
Yep.
in the way we look at war legally.
Yep.
And so, if you're Russia and China, you're just going to keep doing space and cyber shit against us because right now, as far as our doctrine and Article 5 exist, it does not result in that. And oh, by the way, again, like I said about like you actually have to go fucking read like the article, the articles in the NATO Charter. It also people don't realize like in theory, China and or Russia could actually attack and invade Hawaii and Guam, and because of the way the treaty is written, because we were concerned about sort of all of the colonies being at risk of causing World War III, they're actually omitted in the charter.
Wow.
So if you go look at actual charter, they don't explicitly mention all these sort of like fucking colonies and territories, but it basically makes it very clear about like Article 5 applies within like this very like concrete box.
Like CONUS.
Yes, basically
Yeah.
CONUS America, these parts of Europe, and that's basically it. So if you get invaded in the Caribbean, fucking St. Martin for the Dutch, sorry, Article 5 doesn't apply in there. Same thing with Guam and Hawaii. It does not apply to these sort of weird territories.
That's wild.
So again, and I'm not citing it perfectly, but I'm just telling you, the Chinese or Russians could easily invade fucking Guam or Hawaii or attack it, and we could not use Article 5 because it does not apply for those parts of American territory.
That's fascinating. You reminded me with the cyber stuff. If you don't follow him, check him out, Andrew Thompson at Imposed Cost. He talks about that all the time.
Really?
That the idea that the United States needs to come to grip with cyber as a hostile act, and
Yes.
these ransomware groups or whomever they are, like we need to stop looking at it just in a law enforcement perspective. How does the whole when we talk, even not talking about Russia and Ukraine, when we talk about these non-government or non-state armed groups, cyber is a whole new arsenal for them,
Yes.
right? And they don't even have to be good. They can hire people. They can, get script kiddies. They can download stuff. How does that now figure into this asymmetrical situation and our relationship with these groups, whether they exist now or will?
It takes advantage of our strategic narcissism. I mean, that you can be under attack and not acknowledge that you're under attack. I mean, that's the way it works. It's
Yeah.
like it's asymmetric warfare. How do you take a battle to a stronger adversary? I mean, the United States, with all its power and its might, do things that undermine it, but are under the radar enough that there's no response.
Right.
So I think cyber warfare, information warfare, things like this.
Is to your knowledge, is this something you guys work on? And to your knowledge, is there anybody in the government that's raising alarms and saying, look, we need to rethink these policies?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
but part of the problem is that if information warfare, if the attack surface are, domestic groups in the United States that are part of the legitimate political debate in the United States, if you want to counter it, you say, okay, well, we're going to control that kind of information. Well, that's censorship.
Right.
I mean, that's like checkmate.
Right.
That's where they get you.
No, and a lot of like my research, if I'm not doing like security systems and cooperation, I'm also doing information warfare, and Will is nice enough to use my book in one of his classes.
Oh, yeah.
The Old and New Battle Spaces book.
Hey, if you want to have my students buy my book as well,
Yes.
that would be great.
We defy. Yep, we defy. Here, you want me to hold it up?
No, it's okay. I'm just joking with
No,
you.
no, no.
But you need the university edition, which is like $120.
Yeah.
The university.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Gotta pick on those rich Northwestern kids. No, but it's the fact that I think what's changed when it comes to information warfare is the fact that American adversaries used to go for a political angle in the sense of let's just promote communism,
Our ideology.
our ideology, and what now they've gone towards the model is
Which is
let's
cause chaos.
chaos. So
Yeah.
there's a great term called schismogenesis, which is basically it's a fancy old anthropology term to basically cause schisms and divisions in a society. And why is that important is the fact that you want to just support everyone being crazy.
Right.
Right. You support everyone being crazy.
Yeah, you take something that are
Boy,
already
that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Sounds very familiar.
something that's indigenous, something that already
Yes.
exists.
Because it's too cheesy if you try to insert as a Russian or a Chinese person,
Right.
your own agenda.
Right,
It's
right,
no,
right.
just find the craziest
Right,
shit.
right.
Like Texas exit, that was known as Texit or Cal exit, or as we saw it worked out in Britain, Brexit from the EU. And it actually fucking works. You find these fucking grassroots operations.
You try to find accelerants. I mean,
Right.
it's like any good intelligence operation does not leave footprints. That what you want to do is you want to create the effect, but do it in a way that it appears to be entirely
Right.
indigenous.
But does it even at this point,
that's
does
classic.
it even matter if they leave footprint? Like if we know that the Chinese are funding an organization in the US we're not going to take action against the U.S. And then the people that are part of those organizations, they don't care where the money's coming from. So does it even matter?
Well, they may not even know where the money comes from.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, you get tough calls. I mean, okay, Tulsi Gabbard, she repeats, it's like Moscow talking points. Is that legitimate? I mean, she's a legitimate part of American political discourse.
Right.
Should I say, she's an agent of Moscow? I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, yes, no. I act against her. I mean, I'm doing a really messed up thing in domestic American politics. Checkmate. I mean, that's that's a dilemma. We have a First Amendment. We don't limit political speech.
Right.
We move to limit political speech because we think it's influenced by, Russian or, some other kind of foreign.
It seems that we could do a better job, though, of targeting foreign entities that are specifically trying to hurt America and Americans, like TikTok and others that, like, why can't we just kick them the hell out?
No. But this is the other problem too. Is so I've talked to the folks at Northcom in the J39. So the J39 at Northcom is responsible for basically identifying and dealing with any sort of foreign adversarial influence operations against the U.S. The problem is, if they identify something and it has a domestic IP address, they have to hand it out to the FBI.
Right.
They cannot touch it at Northcom. They
Right.
cannot at that point. That becomes highly problematic because does FBI have the resources or ability to even deal with this? And by the way, more than likely,
Not
whoever is
their
doing
priority.
this or promoting it is actually in Russia and China anyways.
But they're coming in through a VPN. They're bouncing. So
exactly.
Yeah.
I
But
mean, we have our rules. I mean,
We have
what
our
do you-
rules.
What do you
Right.
do?
We have
What do you
rules.
do about Tucker Carlson? I mean, Tucker Carlson, I think for any professional in counterintelligence is like a security threat. And, I mean, it's like, okay, there it is. I mean, you look at it, I don't know, is it what it is? Yet, suppressing Tucker Carlson's speech is a big problem in our domestic politics. I mean,
it defeats who we want, who
that's
we
right.
are.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what do? Do you educate the American public and say that this guy's, recycling Moscow's talking points? Well, duh. But I don't know. I mean, he also has points that are legitimate, I think, in terms of questions about American policy.
and this is where we have to lead with our values and transparency, and this is very difficult for us to accept and handle. And I say this now, having again taught at the Naval War College the last couple of years now, because I have officers from lots of other countries that have gone through a war college or a training education experience in Russia, China, etc. And I'll ask them, like, what was it like? And the thing I do appreciate is they feel comfortable enough that I create a very safe space. I'm big in safe spaces. But like they'll admit that, like, yeah, the Russians or the Chinese, when we go there for training education, tightly control us. They only let us see what we're allowed to see. We can't ask questions. It's very sort of like transmission only. We can't, we're very controlled. And, as much as like we see the value and benefit of the Chinese and Russians in terms of our relationship, when we're here in America, you take us to Detroit. You take us to Montgomery, Alabama. You take us, obviously to LA and other nicer parts of the country, but you take us to these places and you don't control us.
Right.
And you have us in these classrooms in the U.S., and you have these frank, honest, open discussions with us in a way that no
Would never
other
happen.
country
Right.
Yeah, would never happen back.
Right.
would ever have and never had. I mean, the best thing I ever heard was like an Algerian officer telling me, I've been to Russia and China so many times, and I'm loving my experience here because you treat me like I'm an American, you talk to me like I'm an American, and you don't hold back, and you show me everything. The Russian Chinese don't do that for us as Algerians, and that's our greatest fucking strength. But the problem is, at the same time, back to Will's point,
right.
it's also easily targeted, and it's a leverage point that if we don't educate our own people on this. The fact that like it's easily attacked.
Do we have questions
Yeah,
for these guys?
We can ask questions. Yeah.
It's hard too, though, in the sense of because I don't listen to Tulsi or Tucker Carlson in terms of like knowing what their talking points are, but it's tough too because if somebody spoke out against the war, the invasion of Iraq, then we could have said that they were, giving Saddam Hussein or Iraqi talking points. So it's hard to say.
That's why it's like checkmate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, like, are they on that side or do they see things differently than the rest of us do? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, Scott Ritter.
Who's been a guest on this show, oddly. Yes, a number of years ago.
Many years
Okay, many years ago. Many moons ago.
Well,
Spent
he
a lot
was-
of time in Moscow.
He was problematic, but this was before he started hanging out with Kadyrov.
Okay, I'm like,
Yeah.
have you washed like the couch or the chairs? have you sanitized?
Brother,
It's a new studio.
you can go back in time and watch that 3-hour interview for yourself, and you tell me what you think.
It's a new world.
Yes, it is.
What are these questions? Let's get some questions.
Alex Bennett, thank you very much. Hey guys, I'm on an oil tanker in the North Pacific right now. The weather is really bad, but I should have connection for at least part of the episode. Have a great time. Thanks, Alex, man.
He's in the Merchant Marine.
Yeah,
Oh, good for him. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Fucking good on you for doing that shit, man.
Yeah. M. Corbin, thank you very much. By chance, did you come across a Dr. George Babchuk? He is 72 years old, primary care physician for Northwest Indiana in Ukraine currently.
I have not, but I was hunkered down in my little area. So
In part of our little research project on Ukraine, we've identified at least 500 civil society actors and groups that are doing NGO types of things like this in Ukraine. So
That's a
if
big
you want to actually
country.
send me that note, I can track him down because we're trying to actually code and identify every single sort of like organization, person, or group that is doing things.
Are you tracking the foreign fighters also?
We're trying to, yes.
it's a little tougher. But
It's a little tougher, but I said we're trying to.
I get it.
We're trying to. So I really appreciate it because we're always. I feel like every week a person's like, "Do you know about this person or doctor or organization or actor that's doing something in Ukraine?" And you're like, half the time it's like yes or no, and please tell us more because we would actually love to know this person because we're always trying to figure out what's going on there.
New Bob Dole, thank you very much. Am I crazy? Had the Epiphany, part of the GWOT motivation could be interpreted as a secular iteration of the Crusades, thus regionally counterproductive.
Whoa, a little throwback with a secular GWOT crusade. I mean, there's enough, I think, at least in terms of data, interviews, polling, and elite interviews to suggest that after 9/11, we just got really angry as a country and just wanted to fucking take it out on everybody that wasn't on our side. So
If you're brown, you're down.
yeah, and it's you're either with us or you're against us. Like it was just one of those things of like we had a traumatic event, over 3,000 Americans killed, and it just is one of those things of like you're either with us or you're against us, or we're gonna fucking murder you. And I honestly think, when I say think, to me, I don't know if you will, there seems to be enough sort of fucking research that's been done now, like the consensus, like because there's been so many articles done about this at this point, at least in our field. The consensus basically seems to come down to the fact that like lots of bias in the Bush admin, there was no conspiracy, lots of just plucking, things that fucking support, like your cause to go to war.
Ideological fever dreams.
Yes, and then you just basically go down the GWOT fucking slide of just like, yeah, we're doing this because everyone needs to pay, it has to be punished for this, and that, I mean,
it's a vacation from strategy. You don't have to think about what hard choices you have to make. Everybody can be your enemy. Everything can be a threat.
The GWOT, like not the GWOT, the invasion of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Was one of the best military actions we've had in a very, very long time. It was well planned, well executed. We won our war and when I say we, I mean America. I wasn't part of that invasion.
Small footprint, lots of air
we
power.
won that war, took out AQ in a very, very short period of time, and then the party was over, and the hosts were trying to go to bed, and we sat down on the couch and turned on the TV. And then because the Taliban was never our enemy, right?
That's right. So the war ended in 2004, 2005.
Exactly. And then
we're done.
And then we just kicked it for a while.
No, and this is an important thing that we have to talk about as well. I think it's important for the audience and us all to acknowledge and recognize. There are a few groups that we call terrorists that actually aren't terrorists. They're just sort of like regional, local insurgents. And the reason why I say like the terminology matters is the fact that
the PKK.
Yes, the PKK, even the Taliban, even Al-Shabaab in Somalia, even Boko Haram in West Africa.
They're not expeditionary.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the reason why I say it's why this actually fucking matters is because they don't follow us back home to the American homeland. And this actually fucking matters because in a weird way, they easily could, especially like for example in Somalia with Al-Shabaab,
There's a big Somali population.
up in Minnesota,
Yeah.
St. Paul.
Yeah, but what they fight for is they want to make Somalia great again.
Yes,
And,
they do.
you know, it's like, okay, all right, fine, whatever your weird thing is, and you know what you want to organize. I mean, look at the change now from GWOT to Syria in recent days. I mean, here you got like affiliates of the Islamic State. Are they the good Islamic State? Like NATO-aligned Islamic State? Or are they the bad Islamic
They're Al
State?
Qaeda light.
No.
know,
I think
it's
the best
like-
quote was from our buddy Michael Weiss, that he called them like the woke jihad or DEI jihadists.
Yeah, we're the secular Islamists.
Yeah, and it's a really funny joke in one context because the fact that like all they're saying is institutions.
But you know what?
Praise institutions.
You
like
know,
they
there
read
might-
Why Nations Fail.
Believe it or not, there might be the Islamic State. We'll be okay with them. As long as they're going to align in terms of our interests internationally. You know what? Whatever they want to do in Somalia, knock yourself out. I mean, in
Syria.
Syria.
Yeah.
But we're also thinking
But-
about fucking Somalia too as well.
Somalia, whatever. Knock yourself out. You know, make Syria great again. I don't care how you do it. All I care about is, how you align what your interests are, what our interests are. And, it's like that's a sign of the big change. Because GWOT, it'd be like, ding, 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 ding.
Just kill them all.
Kill them all. Islamic State, jihad, 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 jihad. And, it's like we're not there now.
Yeah.
And that's a big point of inflection, and that's a really big change in terms of
Which again takes us back to the original report earlier on, which is basically in Syria. We need to just engage. And the problem that pisses us both off right now is the fact that, like, as far as we are aware and concerned right now, there is no American presence on the ground, state or any other sort of like three-letter agency, as far as we're aware of right now. Why is that concerning? If we are not engaging the Syrians right now in this current moment, other than the fucking CNN,
Someone else is.
someone else is. And again, it takes me back to my original point, which is I don't want Russian bases in Syria because that's a base of Russian military power in the Mediterranean, and it's an ability for them to project military power into Libya and beyond into Africa.
It's also, though, I'm curious because it's not bad to see Russia get tied up with like they aren't going to get along with the Islamic State for very long.
No.
Oh no, no, and I think that's a good point as well. But at this point, like,
it's like let them be like us, back in the day. Let them step in it in all kinds of really bad
Quagmires.
relationships.
Yeah.
but I also think there is an inflection point that is Russia is very weakened right now. 40% of their economy is tied up in just the war machine.
Right.
the ruble is in shambles. Like to me, if we have to,
I mean, earlier this week I had a look into Russia, and I was not impressed. Granted, it was
A war zone, but
yeah.
the Ukrainian occupied part of Russia, but you know.
Yeah, I was.
No, but
Yeah.
I think that's an important point is to point to the fact that like this is an inflection point, and it's like if we're not acting right now and immediately and quickly and with allies and partners to basically push and box out the Russians from fucking Syria, and also even Libya, like you can force a really great fucking strategic dilemma on Putin in Moscow by basically saying, you know what, you can have your bases, or you can keep your bases, or you can lose your bases. But that's our choice, and that can be determined how you decide to negotiate with us over Ukraine.
Yeah,
And-
but also, I mean, in terms of Syria, Yemen, Sudan, Central African Republic, Mali, whatever, these places that Russia wants to engage, there are a lot of ways in which you can kind of mess them up with a much smaller footprint than they have. And, you know, they're in these places with partners that really didn't work out so well for us.
Yeah.
And what you can say is, it's like, okay, you know, give it a try. Let's see how that works out for you. And, you know, I think like recent events in Mali with the death of a lot of Russians at the hands of you know, these separatists, it's like, it's not working out for them.
Yeah.
the
And
Chinese trying to like set up economic deals in Afghanistan.
yeah,
Like,
it's
okay.
Yeah, get on with your bad self.
It's like, yeah, we've been there.
Yeah.
You know, been there, done that.
Yeah.
GWOT, strategic overextension, you know, commitment in places where it's like bad partners. And, you know, it's like what you can do is like if your adversary or competitor is like in committing self-inflicted harm, who are we to intervene and, you know, potentially disrupt that process? So I think that having, I mean, the bottom line, I think in a lot of this discussion is that for 30 years, we've not really had strategic focus.
Right.
And now we're at a point where we have to have that. You know, I mean, it's our peril if we don't do that. So in all of these cases, it's like I tell this to my students. It's like in a serious engagement, you ask yourself the question, why do we fight? You have to be able to tell soldiers, you have to be able to tell the American public, why do we fight? But in a larger strategic sense, you have to be able to explain to the American people in a coherent fashion, why do we care? Why would we give assistance to Ukraine? Why do we care about whether, you know, Russians are in Mali or in Chad or something like this, rather than doing it as a reflexive thing?
Right.
Because if it's totally reflexive, I mean, that's the invitation to mistakes. If you ask yourself the question, why do we fight? You know, why do we commit? Then you have an approach that, I mean, it's more conservative in a classical sense. And, you know, ultimately you end up with better partners, same lines of effort, and, you know, it's like that is a much better approach for competition. So this is where we are now. And, you know, as a people, I think that there's a major readjustment that's going on, and you know, new leadership in Washington. We'll see where this leads.
Do we got more for these guys?
Luis Vasquez, thank you very much. Thank you for another amazing podcast. Well, thank you for listening. M. Corbin, thank you very much. I've been expecting the same for Kursk. How many battle-hardened fighters would we expect to see lost?
Well, how many? Okay, I mean, battalion that I was associated with, I mean, lost 5% in 60 days. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a hard question.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is the fact that, like, you know, depending who you talk to on the front lines in Ukraine, like average, like commander. Frankie, sorry, my mic's bad. My bad. Oh shit. All right.
I mean, okay, Ukrainians that I've talked to. I mean, it's a weird war in Ukraine because there are a lot of people that aren't mobilized, and then there are people who are mobilized who kind of get stuck being mobilized because they never get relieved. Most of them expect to die. And there's a sort of fatalism that they see people all around them getting killed. I mean, I've been going back and forth for, be coming on 3 years. There are all kinds of contacts, people I've met, people I've become friendly with who are no longer alive.
Yeah.
And it's very different, than American experience in warfare.
Do they share, because the Russians have almost like culturally that fatalism, you look at Leningrad, like you look at some of these big battles. Do the Ukrainians, is that something that they have in common culturally?
I think they do, and Ukrainian folks might be down on me, but they're also Soviet, and I don't mean that in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that country had a heroic struggle against Nazism that the resistance was such a devastating impact on that collective society, Russian and Ukrainian, that is several generations away, but I think is ingrained in the consciousness.
Right, it's just a trauma.
Yeah, so when they fight, to lose 5% of your population is a terrible thing, but it's one of the things that happens in warfare. And, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, in the year to come, whether Ukrainians really will have to mobilize more.
Yeah.
But it's a battle that, here we are. I mean, it's a major land war in Europe of the scale that we have not seen since 1945.
Do you get a sense from the general Ukrainian population, the young people, and I know that a lot of people are rogering up or they're getting drafted, they're going, but do you get a sense that if they were to get pressed and the draft were to expand and the hardships increased, that they would settle for a peaceful solution outside the border of their living experience? So, out at the border of Ukraine or.
That's a hard question too. I mean, that's what, when I come back to this country, people we talk to, they always ask, they say, what's your assessment about the will to fight? And the will to fight is contingent. It's how much is the adversary in your face.
Mm.
And Russia is in their face in a way that's changed in the years since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Ukrainian cities are dark now. It's cold. The air alerts are constant. The hardship is increasing. That focuses people's minds. A lot of people have left that country. There are millions of Ukrainians that live outside that are not part of the fight. But in some situations, the fight comes to you.
Yeah.
And
it's like that whole issue about, the creation of a nation. This is the creation of a nation. Ukrainians are going to hate Russians for generations now.
Yeah.
Whereas 10 years ago, the difference between Russians and Ukrainians, not so much.
It was like Canada, America.
That's
Like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
And
everyone had a cousin or relative in Canada.
That border was open, but when you find somebody in your backyard threatening you who's in your face, then that changes the mentality. And I think it's true on the Russian side too, because there are Russian soldiers who thought that they were invading people who forgot that they were Russian,
Yes,
who
100%.
wake up one day and discover that they're fighting a war in a foreign country. So for Ukrainians, the thing that they have is they have home turf advantage. They have a growing sense of nationalism. Even if the United States steps away, I think Eastern Europeans who are concerned about Russia are going to step in. And the war is going to get worse. And what that's going to do is that's going to have a counterbalancing effect, which is that Ukrainians are going to discover an even stronger sense of nationalism. And, you know, it's their country. They're fighting for their sovereignty. They're fighting for their freedom. Russians are fighting to subjugate a foreign country.
Right.
That is a hard battle for them to win.
Right.
And what history shows us over the last 150 years is nationalism, a sense of national identity, is very hard to crush. And for Russia, the fate, even if they can subjugate that country and somehow incorporate it, it's going to become a virus. It's going to become a cancer in their own system.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether it's you know, suicide bombers in the Moscow metro, you know, the millions of ethnic Ukrainians in Russia who, you know, begin to wonder about, you know, where they fit in this conflict. You know, it's a tragedy for Russia. It's
It'll
a
be like
war
the
that
IRA
they
at an
cannot-
exponential level.
Yeah, no, and
People who blend in, right?
Yeah, no, and that's what I think is really tough about this is the fact that, you know, like to Will's point, you know, again, I was there a few months before the war kicked off in August of 2021, and the fact that like every Ukrainian would tell me and my whole research team that the idea of Russia invading us was so just not like a thing you would ever consider. Like it was just like, and then they'd be like, it'd be like if you're a Canadian and the Americans invade you,
Right.
like it doesn't make sense. It's like we're all the same people basically.
Right.
And it's like, and it made sense when I spent 2-3 weeks in Ukraine, and I would meet people and be like, oh yeah, I have a cousin or an uncle or a brother or a mother or a father or a mother-in-law in Russia.
And I'm in Ukraine and I interact with them, you know, with the Russian language,
Yeah.
which most people speak,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is not the same as Ukrainian,
Yeah.
but is integral to the way that they were raised. And but the strength of the identity,
Yes.
the formation of a sense of them as a people. And I mean, at a point now where a country of, I don't know, maybe there are 35 million people who still live in Ukraine, in which you have 500,000 of them are now casualties of war, with many more to come. That begins to transform their sense as a people, and, you know, to the question of what is the future of warfare there, the will to fight.
Yeah.
Which over the last month, polls have now come out in Ukraine that the average Ukrainian is actually more open to the idea of actually seeking peace at this. And when I say seek peace, it's basically, you know, it's not you want peace. It's just like all we want is peace. Like
Right.
the idea of
We're not
like,
going to surrender, but we want.
Well, what they want is they want their country.
Right.
yes,
Right.
and they don't want to be fucking dealing with the blackouts and the terror strikes against fucking schools, hospitals, and you have to
But if they don't have peace, what are they going to do?
Right.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what if the adversary doesn't give them peace?
Right.
I mean, people are very, very tired, but they don't have a choice.
Right.
They're going to fight. And, because what's the alternative? I think for some people, at least, I'm dealing with maybe a self-select group because I'm among people who are fighting, that, what they say, well, what is peace in parts of Ukraine that are occupied by Russia? It's sort of this political cleansing. Adult males know what will happen to them. They know what their fate will be. And many of them judge it's better to die fighting than to live in that kind of subjugation,
Yeah.
because they know that they will be subordinate in this empire. And they also see the people who are called to fight against them. People who are the dregs of Russian society, of people who are ethnic minorities, people who are socially disadvantaged. And they see what kind of system that is. So, yeah, they're fighting for their freedom.
Yeah.
So, what do they have to lose?
And obviously back to like the losses question, which was the original part of the question, was, like depending who you talk to, certain parts of the front that we've been able to interpret is like the losses is basically 3 Russian casualties to 1 Ukrainian. Some parts of the front it could be 5-1, and some parts of the front it could be 15 or even 20-1. While that sounds awesome from an American perspective, because at least from a U.S. perspective,
well, Ukraine's about a quarter the size of
Yeah.
Russia, so
Right.
who's going to run out of people first?
yeah.
Right.
But from a U.S. military perspective, we do love this sort of like this weird standard of like, well, if you can maintain a 15-1 kill ratio or fucking casualty ratio, it makes it better.
It briefs well on PowerPoint.
But it's
Yes.
like World War One. I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
it's like whose will to fight is going to break first. And I don't know. I mean, like I say, home turf advantage. I mean, the
Yeah.
Ukrainians have home turf advantage because they have nowhere to go.
But I also think
The
that
Russians, they're invading a foreign country. They have a place to go, back to Russia.
Yeah.
But I also think, you have to always put an asterisk next to these fucking Russian losses, because these are not normal Russian losses either. When I say not normal Russian losses, is the fact that like this isn't like they're losing,
People from St. Petersburg or Moscow.
or like
Yeah,
the
but
VDV.
they're still losing Russians. And
Yeah,
it's-
or they're losing people from the prison system, or they're losing people from
Yeah, but these
Mali
people,
and Niger
these
and other
people all have
and
families.
Syria.
You know,
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
Nepal
it
and
has an
North
impact.
Korea.
Yeah, or North Korea now, but I think that's the problem with this conversation as well. Is like, cool, you can inflict 15 to 21, 15 to 20 fucking losses on the Russians. If you're just killing off the like the prison population and a bunch of mercenaries, does it really have that much of an impact? Because as far as we know from from Russian tactics, is the Russians just like the VDV, which is like basically like their version of like
Paratroopers.
paratrooper Green Berets. They basically force these meat wave assaults to be, go attack these positions. They obviously don't say you're all going to die, but just go attack these positions, and they
Yeah,
use
but-
drones to
But
identify
what's
like
the will to fight?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
when you have a command that the soldier next to you know is expendable, versus a command where they're trying to motivate you to fight, but they're also trying to protect you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big difference.
I mean, honestly, taking over Ukraine is probably the worst outcome for Russia at this point, because now you have a population that looks just like you, can speak your language, and
Everybody in the Moscow metro is a potential suicide
exactly.
bomber.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it's a terrible war, and it's a terrible strategic error on the part of the Russians. I mean, if it had been the 3-day war
Right.
they had anticipated, and it was a close thing,
Right.
maybe at that point they could have imposed themselves, you know, indirectly forming a government of their preference for Ukraine. It's too late now
Yeah.
because Ukrainians have gone through that experience. I mean, it's a tragedy and a liberation at the same time.
Yeah.
Because they've had the experience, the collective experience of oppression by a foreigner, by a foreign government, and the act of collective resistance. That's what I like about it.
Yeah.
When I go there. I mean, that's where I feel the freedom of, you know, my engagement with Ukrainian forces on front lines. I'm not sure that's in our national interest, by
Right.
the way. You know, looking at our larger project in terms of, you know, foreign military training, are they the perfect partners and so forth? I think that that's a political decision for our leadership to decide. So, you know, yes, no, maybe, but looking at the situation for what it is, you know, that's a stark fist of reality. At the very least, I think it's important for us to engage with it because the way that Ukrainians fight tell us a lot about what warfare in the 21st century is like against a peer adversary.
It's horrifying.
And it's new, yet it's very old.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder of us that our vacation from that type of warfare is over, and that these things that we've relied upon, for example, air superiority, sort of, which is like almost an ingrained reflexiveness.
You guys assume that Air Force will be there, and you get it.
Unless it's daytime.
Well, but I mean, this is what I see in terms of the medical part. You know, it's like tactical medicine, evacuation, these types of things, and then you realize it's like, oh wait, yeah, that's so dependent on air power, air supremacy,
Right.
and then when you have to do that when that's absent, and you know, it's like, okay, drones and all these kinds of things are new, but when you've got a 10-kilometer zone where the evacuation of the critically wounded soldier may be by foot, you know, that's like ancient Greece.
Yeah.
You know, fighting the Persians or something like that, because that's what you have. I mean, you might have a few techniques and a few drugs and things like that that'll sustain in that, but that foot travel is just that.
What else do we have for these guys? Because it's starting to get late here.
Yeah, we got to head back to
RS, thank you very much. Dave, please let Malcolm Nance know that Sniper is out on all digital platforms.
Sniper is an outstanding film with Tom
an outstanding
Berenger.
series.
Yeah,
You're deeper into the series.
I've
than I
seen
am.
all 10.
Yes.
I have my card punched.
And I will let him know that. I'm sure that he will have some solid critique for the sniper tactics used in that. M. Corbin, thank you very much.
Oh wow.
Thank you for answering my
Great
question,
fucking
Dr.
time,
Reno.
Yeah.
Dee, did we have anything on Patreon?
Okay, cool. Guys, both of your work is non-classified and published publicly.
Yep.
Where can people go to find, like, if they're interested in these topics and the types of things that you write about, where can they find you?
I honestly, Will Reno and Jahara Matisek.
Yeah, I know. We should keep a page and consolidate all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's
There's not a repository?
Oh, good Lord. Caught us with our pants down. I mean, it's one of the things we've been thinking about. We got to get it. We got to get it separate.
Yeah, we
webpage
have
for
to
that.
do it.
But Google us. You know, what's our best and greatest? I mean, you and J Man's book.
I mean, like
New Wars. And,
like we publish in Wall Street Journal, Foreign Affairs, Modern War Institute, War in the Rocks. Like, I mean, like the good thing for you guys, if you're watching this right now, there's only one Jahara Matisek in the whole world. So more than likely, if you type in Jahara Matisek, you'll find my stuff and you'll find Will Reno stuff because
You'll find me, but problem is there's Reno, Nevada. So.
that's always the problem. So at least
It's just named for a relative, by the
And,
way.
and it goes to my apologies that if you logged on hoping to see like an actual Jahara, I do not look like Mia Khalifa. My apologies. And if you're laughing about that Mia Khalifa joke, you should delete your browser history.
Our audience is well familiar.
Wait, who are we talking about?
Mia Khalifa. Yeah, good, right. Way to play that one off, Dave. Way to play that off. Very smooth.
I'm pure.
You're teaching at Northwestern. What class can you teach? Where should students go to sign up for your classes?
Well, I teach a course called The American Way of War, and it's about the evolution of American military strategy, and teach courses of politics of violence and other things that don't always fit neatly in the curriculum, but things I like to engage students.
Guys, final thoughts. We've kept you for like almost 3 hours here.
No, this is impressive. I thought I
great-
thought it was like 9 o'clock.
It was a great conversation. If you have any final thoughts, I'd love to hear you share them. But I think the final thing that I have anyway is I'd like to hear you articulate if you were President Sullivan and you had to articulate this argument or this point that you've made during this interview, that it's important for our government to articulate to the public why we're supporting Ukraine and what the point is. If you were to make that argument to the American public, what would you say?
And you're on the board of a major defense contractor, so it's in your benefit to keep it going.
No, if I'm honest about it, because I could have a Ukrainian point of view,
Like a pragmatic point
Yeah.
of view.
because I'm often there and among Ukrainians that are fighting. If I'm honest about it, I think that part of it's about credibility. I mean, we're in Russia's face at this point, so that's already an established fact, and we can't sort of rerun that phase of history again. I think it's important to show China that our commitment to Ukraine may be like our commitment to Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that that's a factor, or our commitment to Philippines or Japan or South Korea. So if we think that that's important, we should think that Ukraine is important. I think that solidarity with our NATO partners and allies, that's a thing. I think that withdrawing from Ukraine also inherently means withdrawing from Europe to some extent.
Yep.
So we have to think, would a Europe without American strategic presence be a better or worse place to be? And would that affect us? So I think there'd be pretty serious consequences for that. But at the same time, our objectives are not the same as Ukraine's objectives. I don't think that our definition of winning is the same as theirs.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, that's part of it too. So I don't know where that ultimately leads, but I think it's important to explain to the American people what all of this assistance is actually about, why it should matter to them. Notice in my explanation, I've tried not to be sentimental, because I think that being sentimental, which I will be on a personal level, very deeply so, but that's my commitment. That's not my country's commitment. My country's commitment is about its interests and about its security and its protection. So, defining our engagement with Ukraine, I think that that's ultimately what it's about.
Yeah, and and if I had to give sort of my sort of more American military perspective is, yes, I want to see Russia defeated in Ukraine, but what does that look like? And at a personal level, if I could be, a general or the czar for the day and basically dictate the events in Ukraine right now, it would, in my mind, what I think would be achievable is basically push all Russian forces out of all of Ukraine, except for probably Crimea and probably the far eastern parts of Ukraine as well. So you have to almost accept the fact that, like, there are places like Crimea, even if we actually, from a Western perspective, could put like that part of Ukraine under duress and actually stress it and actually push all the Russians out. That's not really practical. It's not. And so you have to live in the world of practicality and the fact that, like, yeah, at this point you may have to accept at this critical juncture is you're gonna fight for whatever land you can get until January 20th, when Trump becomes president, and then the next day everything might just fucking freeze in place. Mm-hmm. And we have to accept it, and that might be what it becomes. And that's a harsh reality that I don't think any of us like, but it might become the reality. So, if you're Russian or Ukrainian right now, that's what you're fighting for. You're fighting for leverage of whatever happens on January 20th, on the 20th and 21st is right now.
Well, the underlying factor though too is their will to fight.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're going to assist the Ukrainians, I want to see evidence of their will to fight.
Yeah.
I don't want Afghanistan. I don't want Iraq or anything like
Which
that.
means you have to mobilize younger people, not just right now. The average age of the average conscript in Ukraine is like 45, 46.
Wow.
That's
Jesus
highly
Christ.
fucking
Wow.
problematic. That's
Yeah, it makes me
highly
feel
fucking
good.
problematic.
When I'm there, because I'm like, whoa, there are a lot of people like me.
Wow, that's wow.
No, that's fucking
it's an
problematic.
interesting experiment. Do older soldiers make smarter soldiers?
Which we've actually have asked, like, the Brits and the Germans and the Poles, what's it like to train a younger Ukrainian versus an older Ukrainian? They say, well, the younger the Ukrainian, the more cowboy they are. The older the Ukrainian, the more sort of like reserved and sort of like.
But
Think it through.
in this type of
Yeah.
warfare,
They think about it and they don't like taking risks.
in this
So-
type of warfare with the technology of warfare, in some ways, I think older might be better. It's not sort of hand-to-hand combat. It's looking at the technology. I mean, this last trip, visiting Ukrainian bomb factories, visiting drone innovation cells, and so forth. Like, that type of skill, that type of expertise takes years of training. And, it's not a war for 19 or 21-year-olds. It's, it's a more adult war now.
It is.
Mind you, and when it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit and the snow's blowing and humidity's 100% and you've been out there for a bunch of days, when you're in your 40s and 50s, it's maybe a little different.
Yeah,
than
it's in your bones.
it is in your bones.
Yeah.
And I'm 62 years old and I felt very cold, and I think I'm still fucking freezing. But
Fire maneuver must be very loud. All the
Hips popping.
yeah, the groaning.
it's there are a lot of underlying health conditions.
Sure.
Yeah, you see you see soldiers that are having difficulties where at first you're kind of thinking it's about the situation that they're actually in, but then you realize it's like, oh no, that's actually an underlying condition.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, it's just arthritis in the
That's,
knees.
yeah, it's the arthritis. And I mean, the oldest I think we met in the training programs is 72, and I've definitely met soldiers in their 60s I've met Afghan war veterans. Warms my heart. People who were in Afghanistan, same time I was in Afghanistan, Soviet period, that
Fucking insane.
are,
Fucking
it's
insane.
like, we can have a reunion. And, you know, it's like your war is my war.
Yeah.
It's just
And
fucking again.
how the
fucking
world
insane.
turns.
You fought in Afghanistan in the '80s, and now you're fighting Ukraine against Russia in 2024. That's fucking insane.
I mean, one of the things I like to do is visit Afghan war memorials. You know, different Ukrainian towns. I mean, these are sort of, there's a Soviet aesthetic to them, but I always zero in on them and try to take a photo because, you know, it's like, in a way, I don't, you know, do I feel kinship with Soviets or am I feeling kinship with Russians or Ukrainians? It doesn't really matter because it's the Afghan war and you know, that's the human aspect of it. And sort of the perversity of modern politics that here we are.
Everybody pulling on the same thread at different points in time.
Yep.
Well, thank you guys for coming in and having this conversation with us, and you know, hearing some point of views that people don't normally get to hear.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, happy to oblige.
Yeah, I mean, I we thought we'd be here in an hour, and this.
Yeah. Good
and
luck.
This turned into like almost fucking 3 hours, and I hope your your fans haven't all jumped off. But
No,
like,
no.
No,
This was a
they're
really
here,
great
yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
And yeah, I would love to have you guys back again sometime.
All right.
No, it's awesome because fucking his brother is Rusty Reno, who has his little, his
Here.
little journal, first things, little Catholic journal.
Little Catholic journal. It's like the founding journal of the Catholic Church, but
The founding journal of the Catholic Church.
About American foreign policy, but through a Catholic lens. No. This has actually been like
Muy
really fucking
católico,
fantastic.
yeah.
I didn't realize that we were about to step into like a fantastic conversation.
What,
that,
they're-
like,
all right.
here in
But
New
we
York?
got to blow. We got to get back. Otherwise,
his brother lives in over in Manhattan. So
No
we're-
shit. Okay.
Yeah, so,
Awesome.
like-
Sutton Place.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
north of
No,
the
like
UN.
this was fantastic because like
And we got to go to Germany tomorrow. We got to
Yeah, we're
go
going
to
to
Saggy.
Oh my
tomorrow.
God.
We're about to go see Ukrainians get trained tomorrow.
U.S. Army, Bavaria.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
All right.
and-
Well, we'll let you guys go, man. Thank you for spending so long with us.
No,
and
well, thanks for tolerating us.
for Monday, we're going to be back with Wade Ishimoto. He was a plank owner in Delta Force. I'm like 2/3 of the way through his book. It's called the Intoku Code. Just got part through the Eagle Claw part of it. So that's coming up on Monday. Really excited to talk to him. And then
A little
on
bit.
Friday, I believe is Andrew Bragg.
That's good.
And I think you have his book, Dave, the
not
82nd,
the 82nd.
82nd Airborne guy.
Okay.
So we'll have him on Friday. Otherwise, everyone have a nice weekend out there. Thanks for joining us tonight.
All right. Take care.
Cheers.